What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Awesemo.com NFL Deeper Dive. It's 1 p.m. Eastern Time here, Sunday, the 17th of January, and we're getting ready for the second day of these divisional round matchups between the Browns, Chiefs, Bucs, and Saints. Going to be a good one. Lots of money to be made today, which is exactly why we're here. I'm Dave Loughran on Twitter at Laffy_D, LOUGHY_D. With me, as always, Ben Rasa at JazzRaz DFS, double Z, single Z, and the number one ranked player in the DFS space, Alex Baker himself. You know him as Awesemo on Twitter at Awesemo DFS. Alex, how we feeling today, brother?
Feeling good. I mean, furiously going through all these lineups from yesterday to swap off Clyde Edwards-Helaire. That's a lot of fun. But we got a good two-gamer today. Yeah, I'm kind of curious. You guys have any good lineups going from yesterday's four-gamer?
Ben, what's up, man? How you feeling after yesterday?
Well, I felt good after the first game. Kind of survived it. You know, not that I was way underweight on Akers by any stretch, but I was on Aaron Jones, and there was a lot of guys on the Packers that were really close to bonuses. Nobody really got there, just a lot of like 3X. But I took a stand yesterday and it was just wrong. I really liked that late game, liked the over in the game, and it was just windy and methodical. And I mean, Lamar getting hurt was not why that didn't work. It wasn't working before that. So that was a killer. It happens, but you know what? You pick up the pieces, you go on, late swap to really weird players, hoping for a miracle in those lineups. And obviously some made it through, and we'll have to lean on those today.
Yeah, it was a 3-3 game at halftime, and Huntley came in and he made a couple of plays, but when he overthrew Marquise Brown, that's when you knew things weren't going to go well. He had him on a touchdown there, could have made it a one-score game, missed field goal for Buffalo. And in the early game, very simply, Aaron Rodgers just looks unstoppable right now. The pump fake at the 5-yard line to run it in for a touchdown and just essentially look dominant once again. He should have been picked twice at the end of the half. The Rams forgot how to catch footballs on the defensive end. That's not their job, but they go on to win that game by a healthy 14 points. We were on that one pretty strong here on the deeper dive. And now, Alex, we've got two to get into. The Cleveland Browns first, before we jump into all of these, though. It looks like some money's coming in on the Browns. They're 9-point dogs now. And I was just perusing the internet, seeing other people's opinions, curious on where everyone else stood. And I was amazed at how many people not only thought that Cleveland could cover, but could win this game outright today against Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs.
Yeah, that's pretty shocking, to be honest, because, I mean, Cleveland, they're a very solid team. They've had some really good playoff performances, or they had a great playoff performance versus Pittsburgh. So there was reason to be encouraged from that. And I mean, they got one of the better running backs in the league with Nick Chubb. So the quarterback play is a little shaky, but they seem to make it work by focusing more on the run. So I could see like them having a chance, but I was actually surprised that Kansas City's projected to score more points than pretty much any regular season game. So that was kind of throwing me off.
Yeah, and we're happy to have all of you guys with us, of course. Hit that thumbs up. And more importantly, that subscribe button if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet. About 51, 52, 53, depending on the month, % of people that actually watch these shows are subscribed. Let's buck that trend. Hit that subscribe. Join the community here if you like what we do, if you think along the way we've helped you, or you just appreciate all of the free content, because it's the easiest, simplest way to help support us, along with that thumbs up if you're just getting in. We're happy to have you here too, Greg. All right, let's dive into this, Ben. Cleveland and Kansas City. As you guys can see on the left side of the screen, we're going to go team by team, which we always do, but listing them today feels a little bit more important, just looking at the implied totals here and what we expect to get from them. And if you're jumping into the show late, you'll have an easier time being able to figure out exactly where we are. So, Ben, I think with Cleveland and Kansas City, 9-point spread down from 10, moving past 10 is, I think you'd agree, significant. 9.5 in some spots. 23.75 implied total for the Browns, 33.25 for the Chiefs, 57-point total. Here's my take on this game as a whole, and then let's dive into the Browns. I think Cleveland can cover this game, and I think they will, or cover the spread, but it's not going to be defensively. This is a god-awful defense. They are bad. There's no doubt about it. I don't want to hear, oh, they got Denzel Ward back. It doesn't matter. It's one player. This is still a very bad defense. Remove all of the win games that they played this season and the bad weather games, and they've been dreadful in pass defense. Now they have to face Mahomes. But they have a very strong run game. Kansas City is one of the worst run defenses despite facing the easiest schedule opposing run games this year. And they struggle against play action, which we saw twice against the Las Vegas Raiders. And Baker Mayfield's real strong suit has been operating out of play action and avoiding the blitz. So I think they can cover this game, but it won't be defensively. It won't be slowing Kansas City down. I think it'll be because they have to maintain a pace with them, and it's going to start with their offense. What do you think?
So it's going to be interesting to see how Cleveland approach. I always am interested in things like this because, you go and obviously I assume Cleveland will be confident and believe that they can win, but how much do you want to alter what you just want to do naturally? Against a team like Kansas City, to me, logically, what would Cleveland want to do? They'd want to crush time of possession and really take it down, almost employ like a Baltimore type offense where you're really leaning on Chubb, maybe you sprinkle in Kareem Hunt, and you keep Mahomes off the field. Now, maybe Cleveland goes into the game feeling, they've put up a ton of points in recent weeks. Maybe they go in and say, we can outscore this team. To me, that's a really dangerous situation to try to do that. But having said that, Baker he's got some weapons. He's got Landry. He's got Hooper. He's got two backs that can catch the ball. It's really everything you could ask for. It's just, do you want to get into that type of game against the Chiefs?
I don't think they have a choice. I honestly don't.
See, yeah.
Is their defense good enough to do it any other way?
Well, I think the way would be limit the possessions and up the variance by leaning on Chubb and saying, you know what, I don't want to go back and forth because I don't trust I think, and this is not a hot take. This is why they're almost a 10-point favorite. To me, the Chiefs will have a much easier time moving the ball than the Browns will against the Chiefs defense. I don't think that's pretty obvious in my opinion.
But yeah, look, I don't disagree with that either. I just think if they go down 2 scores early, it could get ugly quick. But more than anything, I actually think this Cleveland offense is built to be able to score against Kansas City because they have a strong ground game and because the play action has worked so well in the past. Alex, you have Kareem Hunt, Nick Chubb, Jarvis Landry, Austin Hooper, Rashard Higgins. Not all of these guys are marquee players, but just naming their options and the weapons on this team. Can they put up enough points today to make this a battle? Because that's what we care about for DFS purposes.
Yeah, I think they can put up some points. Their passing game, although we don't really consider Baker as an elite talent or anything, he's been somewhat effective throwing the ball, averaging 7.3 yards per attempt this year. For context, Tom Brady averaged 7.4, Drew Brees averaged 7.6, so he's very much in the ballpark, although he does throw more interceptions than those guys. And then running the ball has been a real strength of theirs. They're way above the league average in yards per attempt running. So when you're putting them up against a defense in Kansas City that maybe a little bit better than league average, but not a huge difference maker, I think there's a lot of potential, and they're going to need to put up points, as you guys are saying, to keep up. So it's hard to see them, really dominating the game and slowing it down. So that means they're going to have to swing for the fences.
And if that's the case, who are we targeting?
I think I like the wide receivers a lot with Jarvis Landry and Rashard Higgins and Austin Hooper at tight end, because the big knock against Cleveland is they're a run first team, but when you put them in a game where they're a significant underdog, that's going to, on average, yield more passing volume. So I think that's a significant boost, given that Kansas City's pass defense isn't anything really special.
So, Ben, I mentioned this yesterday, and there's no way I'm changing course today, right? I do have interest in Baker, and I do like this Cleveland team. Whether I think they're going to perform well or not is almost irrelevant at this point. This game has a 57-point total. They essentially have a point lower implied total than the Tampa Bay Bucs. So it's not like they are by far the lowest of any team on this slate. They're not. It's negligible when you're talking about them in comparison to the Bucs. Even the Saints at 27.5. Sure, you got about 3.5 points on them, but still, it's not absurdly higher like it is with the Chiefs. It allows me to get as many Chiefs as I want. And I think ultimately, given this game environment with a 57-point total, and I know you and I are on different pages here, so it'll be fun to hash this out. Landry is dirt cheap. He came out on strong late in the season. Remember, Odell Beckham went down. They played 3 horrible weather games. And then Jarvis Landry really started to come on following that. Look at it since the bad weather games, where 3 in a row against the Raiders, Houston, and Philly. Then he had 31, 20, 12, 19, 16, and 20. Those are his fantasy totals over his final 6 games or 5. I can't count. I don't know. Higgins is super cheap. He's the wide receiver too. And then I think Kareem Hunt against this former team will have the ability to produce today. And one of the reasons for that is if you do think they fall behind early, you could see a lot of Kareem Hunt as a pass catcher out of the backfield, as a more so extension of that run game. And Nick Chubb, if they do what you think they're gonna do and try and maintain possession, Chubb could have a monster game against one of the worst run defenses in the league. There is a lot I like here, despite how scary it is to run out, a Cleveland stack or a lot of exposure to them as 10-point dogs or 9.5-point dogs.
Yeah, I mean, this is a 2-game slate. So, what you said right at the top, playing Baker isn't saying that you put him in the category of these other quarterbacks. That's not what It's about. It's about unlocking pieces. Can he keep contact? Then the money you save between him and a guy like Mahomes, you can upgrade at a skill position where you think the gap is much bigger. And with quarterbacks, it can be somewhat, I think paying down is easier to stomach at quarterback, just because there's a lot of ways where even though 2 guys don't play nearly the same type of game, their scores aren't wildly different. Thing about Baker, I don't think he's that good. You've shown in a game like this, he may have opportunities by being bad in some ways. I'm not saying I'm rooting for that, but if they fall way behind, he could throw the ball 40, 50 times. And if you have that, good options around him. I'm with you. I think Higgins is very interesting. Landry, obviously, I like Austin Hooper a lot. I bet his prop. Definitely think that he goes over that receptions prop at 3.5. He's had 11 targets against the Steelers, 7 catches. That's a good spot. And then the 2 backs. Now, I know Kareem Hunt's the pass catcher, but Alex talked about this yesterday. Nick Chubb has taken a big jump in routes run, and I don't think that's going to change here. I think he's kind of an all-purpose back at this point, and he's going to be busy regardless.
How do you break down a little bit more on this backfield, Alex, when we start looking at ownership? By the way, for any of you guys wondering, our ownership projections are at awesemo.com. And is the ownership on, what slate do we have it on for this one?
Just the main slate.
Main slate. Okay, so you switched it up since yesterday. So Nick Chubb is getting around 43%, Kareem Hunt around 33%. And it's no surprise that they're going to be up there, Alex, because, well, the pricing on DraftKings is kind of soft, especially on Kareem Hunt coming off that 2-touchdown game, which actually ended up not even being good when all was said and done for that showdown slate. Do you have one strong preference among running backs for Cleveland today? And would you roster both of them together in any cases?
Yeah, I have a huge preference for Nick Chubb. I mean, Kareem Hunt, he had the production last week, which means the ownership's going to be there. But he didn't have the workload. He just wasn't on the field as much as we would have liked, where Nick Chubb pretty much doubled him up in both rushing attempts and receiving routes. So I think if the ownership's pretty constant between them, although I know Kareem Hunt is a lot cheaper, I prefer some other spend down options at running back over Kareem Hunt. So I'm definitely leaning towards Chubb, and Kareem Hunt is probably going to be a fit for me.
Okay. Top options from Cleveland, Alex.
So I think Chubb, if you want to play, if you play Chubb, I think maybe you take a lower stance on Kansas City in that lineup, because you're playing for Cleveland to really exceed expectations by running, which means they would run the ball a lot. So I kind of like that for game theory. But I think the better plays are probably Landry, Higgins, and Hooper, who should get those additional opportunities if the game script plays out, somewhat similar to what Vegas is thinking.
Top options for you, Ben?
Yeah, it would be Nick Chubb and Hooper. But as Alex said, I mean, really, like with Cleveland, even though they're a sizable dog, they are in actually a very nice spot because of the game environment. If you think that they play better than expectations, Well, that's a huge boost to Nick Chubb because they could slow the game. They could lean on him and maybe he gets the carries. If you think they don't, well, that means they're going to be throwing wildly. And these guys aren't priced. We're not talking about Devontae Adams and those type of prices. Like guys like Higgins, guys like Landry, if they see, 7, 8, 9 targets, it's hard for them not to have a pretty sizable floor. And if they find the end zone, really pay off. So there's a lot to like on Cleveland, despite I'll be honest, if I had to bet this game, I would probably lean to the Chiefs. I don't think that the Browns can handle them, but that doesn't mean they're not relevant for DFS.
And any props you like, any bets here? You just mentioned if you had to take Kansas City, you would, or aside from this game, Kansas City, you mentioned Austin Hooper prop as well. You have something there?
I do. And I just want to say real quick, every week for these playoff games, I have an article posted, Daily Prop, but I also have a quick video available on YouTube. You can check it out. Devontae Adams was yesterday. Austin Hooper was today. Over 3.5 catches. It's minus 133 at BetMGM on OddsShopper. To me, that's just not enough. Like I said, 11 targets against the Steelers. The Chiefs are 24th in the league defending the tight end. He's a focal point of this offense. I think Baker is going to have to lean on him regardless. To me, he clears that pretty easily, to be honest.
Yeah, it's funny because this is what concerns me a little bit. I was thinking the same thing with Jarvis Landry at 4.5. A lot of juice on the over, minus 177, but even 5.5, honestly, he's averaging 6.5 receptions over his last 6 games. Of course, after the win games, after Odell Beckham went down, that's not a coincidence. And he is clearly the number 1 receiver here. And the great thing about Landry props is you're not betting the receiving yards here. You're betting the receptions. And when it comes to Landry, he's a possession guy. He's a slot guy that's going to get a lot of opportunities. He hasn't finished with fewer than 5 receptions since week 11. So I like that. I like a lot of the overs for Cleveland today. Anytime it's a 57 total and their opponent has a almost 34 point implied total, that's going to get me interested, especially if they have to somewhat abandon the run. Alex, do you have anything here before we go to the Kansas City side?
Yeah, I'll mention one other guy that I'm not playing here, which is Donovan Peoples-Jones. Kader Hodge is off the IR. And throughout the year, they've been a little bit even on the pecking order. So I do feel like they'll cut into Peoples-Jones' snap count, which was surprisingly high last week.
And you can check out all these bets, all the props, everything at oddshopper.awesemo.com. You see it on the screen right now. Jordan Klein producing the show. Put it right up there. It's pretty awesome. You could throw up anything, go to receptions, and everyone from the slate is going to pop up. You don't have to go game by game on any of that. And then if you go to game lines, you hover over the game, click see matchup, and it'll break everything down, where the bets are coming in on, what type of line movement we've seen, has the money line moved, all of that great stuff, what the total is doing. It's not just good for betting, but it's good for DFS as well. I use it all the time for preliminary research when I'm getting into DFS. And then I'll come across a bet. Ben, I'm sure you do the same. You come across a bet or a prop that you really like, almost in the process of just doing your routine homework.
No doubt. And honestly, lesser not talked about as much, but sometimes before I fire on a bet, I go here and sometimes it confirms what I already saw. And other times it says, you know what, let me take a second look. And there's nothing better than holding off on a bet. And it turns out that you dug back in and you're glad you did. And OddsShopper is one way, even if you want to use it as a double check. I like to do it like that sometimes just to confirm what my initial lean maybe is where I want to go.
Yep. And Alex, I've done it too. I think DraftKings is my primary book. I'll go there. And then right before I place, I'm like, let me see if there's anything elsewhere. And then you just get a much better line or a much better prop elsewhere at another one of the sites because we list all of them.
Yeah, I mean, like you just win more money if the odds are better. So there's
and save money.
Yeah, I mean, we all like winning more money. That's gonna improve your chance of being a long-term winner a ton.
All right, Kansas City. The Chiefs, Alex, a massive 33.25 implied total. Like you said, that's higher than you see in almost any regular season game. The Browns are getting a Denzel Ward back, but I would urge you not to overstate how much this means. Is it important? Sure, it's great to get a very good cornerback, but they just have so many holes elsewhere that I think this Kansas City total, while I'd be very nervous to bet the over on it, it says a lot about what we should be expecting today from them against this Cleveland defense, Alex. What are you seeing here?
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, The expectations are sky high for Kansas City, and I think they can probably deliver. I don't think the Browns defense is particularly bad, but the Kansas City Chiefs have just been exceptional as far as efficiency, particularly passing. And then you have their main running back is out, so maybe they'd even pass a little bit more, like we saw with the Bills yesterday, which was kind of tilting. But the other thing is, I mean, maybe with the playoff game, they're not gonna ease off the gas quite as early. So I think with the passing volume being so high with Kansas City, it makes a really nice fantasy spot because we know how they're going to produce. We know that they're very likely to produce and who's going to be doing it.
All right, Ben. GQ, what's up, fella? He says Denzel Ward's going to shut Tyreek down. Bet the under in the Kansas City Cleveland game. Look, Denzel Ward's capable of shutting Tyreek Hill down on his own. Props to you, fella, but I don't see it happening.
No, I mean, I don't think those two things are that court. Like, I don't mind leaning under here, but I'm not sure. Similar to what I talked about yesterday with Jalen Ramsey and Devontae Adams, they get Tyreek Hill the ball in situations that you can't stop. Maybe Denzel Ward does a good job of not letting Tyreek get over the top, but when they give him the gadget pop pass, it's very hard. Just like Devontae Adams yesterday when he scored, that play design was literally impossible to stop around the goal line. And no one is more creative than the Chiefs at getting Hill the ball in a lot of different situations. Doesn't mean he's going to have a huge game, but I do know that he will have the opportunities. He's a very explosive player, of course.
So what are you doing with the passing game? We'll get to the running back situation. Clyde Edwards-Helaire not expected to play. That's been a hot topic in our chat. I've seen that brewing since the beginning of the show. But yeah, so we'll get there in a second. Let's talk about Mahomes. Let's talk about the salary. Let's talk about what it takes to pair him with Kelsey and with Tyreek Hill, because in doing so, how worried are you that it's going to kind of pressure you into very, very similar builds as anyone else that's trying to take that same approach?
Very worried because it's only 2 games. And if you do that, you're going to have a couple of pay down options to choose from, and then you're funneled to a couple different guys. To me, that's not the answer today. I'm going to, of course, look to this past game. Mahomes is, it seems almost impossible, regardless that he won't throw the ball 40 plus times. He does basically every week, win or lose. But I don't want to pay basically $24,000 for 3 guys. That's just not the structure that I'm willing to take. And I don't think you have to do that. There are other ways to get plenty of exposure to the Chiefs.
Alex, would you say when you're looking at everything for this slate, right? The 3 highest priced players, not on this team, not in this game, but of all 4 teams, are Patrick Mahomes, followed by Tyreek Hill, followed by Travis Kelce. What have you found in making lineups and just messing around with or not messing around, but with seeing what happens when you're stacking Kansas City, when you're stacking this game? What is it looking like? And are you going to have a lot of Patrick Mahomes stacks with Kelce and Tyreek Hill? And how about some of these peripheral guys like Robinson, like Mecole Hardman, given that Sammy Watkins has already been ruled out for this one?
Yeah, I think there's some intriguing options with Watkins out. As far as Tyreek Hill and Kelce, I think that probably limiting yourself to one of those 2 is a good idea, because it's just like if you put that $24,000 of salary into your lineup, then a lot of people are going to be doing that, and the number of ways you can complete that lineup are very limited. So you'll just have a very similar lineup to everyone else, which isn't, that's going to be somewhat true of every lineup today because it is only a 2-gamer, but especially true with those lineups. But I think there are some good options to throw in there in a Chiefs stack. I think the one that's the most tantalizing is Mecole Hardman, because he's their deep threat, a really talented player that hasn't really reached expectations. His snap count wasn't it's impacted a little bit in the past by Watkins being out, but not quite as much as you would think, because a lot of those snaps are also going to Demarcus Robinson and Byron Pringle. So I'm kind of looking at Byron Pringle being like, no one's playing this guy because he's just not a familiar name. And I feel like the snap counts were fairly decent when Watkins was out earlier in the year. and he's been pretty effective when he's been targeted. So I see some value there.
Ben, how about you with some of these auxiliary options? We know that Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce are top plays. There's no two ways around that. I love them both, which is one of the reasons I will have some Baker Mayfield stacks with, say, Landry and Higgins or Landry and Hooper. I even have some Baker, Landry, and Kareem Hunt running it back with Tyreek Hill and Kelce. I have some Mahomes, Kelce, Hill, Mecole Hardman, and Robinson. Not both, but three pass catchers, because that's just what could happen in this game. And I think we would be crazy to overlook the potential value despite huge volatility in guys like Hardman and Robinson. And we can even talk about Byron Pringle, because crazy things happen when your number 3 receiver, number 2 receiver, number 3 pass catcher is out in Sammy Watkins.
Yeah, I mean, the good thing about the Chiefs is that when you're taking a shot, first of all, it's 2 games, so you got to do something, and Pringle's a way to do that. But when you're going to take a shot on a guy, it's a lot better to do it on a team that's expected to have, say, 5 touchdowns, because it's not like, all right, this team, they may get in the end zone a couple of times and I need to catch the lucky touchdown here. Like, there's a very real chance that Mahomes has a bunch today and Kelce gets his and Tyreek is involved, but there will still be opportunities for guys like Robinson, maybe over the top with Hardman, and guys like Pringle. So I do like that concept. Certainly they can be an addition to an aggressive Chief stacks. They can be a guy and then you try to leverage against either Hill or Kelce within them. The Chiefs are obviously going to be the pay down option because there's 3 of them there. It's hard to distinguish, but I do think all 3 in some ways hold value, obviously just not together.
Who would you say your favorite pass catching options are from this team, salary, considered, right? And I'm asking you to say, do you like Hill better? Do you like Kelce better? Do you like Hardman better than Robinson, and so on and so forth?
So, I mean, it's just so weird because it's all or nothing. Like, the Browns are pretty much all mid-range options. For the Chiefs, you have the most expensive players on the slate or the true punts. To me, Hardman is probably the most interesting just because he has the ability to blow his salary out of the water on one play, kind of like MVS. That is an intoxicating type of guy because the targets don't have to be there and you can still get bailed out. Whereas, Robinson, to get there, I think he needs north of 5 or 6 targets to have a reasonable output. Of the big 2, I mean, it's kind of a coin flip. I would go with Tyreek. That's probably a product of me liking Austin Hooper quite a bit.
What about you, Alex?
I'm having a little bit of dissonance between the ones that I like and the ones that I'm playing. So because I feel like Mecole Hardman, first, I mean, I think Kelce is the best option. That is because a tight end is just a more scarce position than wide receiver. The fact that it's a 2-game slate mitigates that a little bit, though, compared to yesterday. But then I kind of, my heart's telling me Pringle as a differentiating play, but I feel like Robinson's probably the most consistent, where Mecole Hardman being a boom bust play would be good if he wasn't popular, but I feel like he will be kind of popular today.
Yeah, I was actually over at Pro Football Focus just looking to see how many routes were run in those 5 weeks. I think it was 5 weeks that Sammy Watkins missed, right? Between week 6 and 10. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, between week 6 and 11. Sorry, because they had a week 10 bye, just to see what we'd come up with here. And routes run were Tyreek Hill 189, Robinson 164, Hardman 101, Byron Pringle 100. So targets 51 for Hill, 23 for Robinson, 17 for Hardman, and 10 for Byron Pringle. So, like Ben said, that Hardman can blow the top off a defense too, and he can blow his salary out of the water. But I do think if you're looking for just PPR and hoping that maybe the additional targets will result in something better, I think Robinson is probably the guy. Let's talk about the run game, Ben. No Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Is he officially out? Because what I last saw is that he is not expected to play. A lot of people saying he's out, but I don't think he's confirmed out. I think he's not expected to play.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty damn sure that he's not going to play, but I haven't seen it confirmed. No,
I'm just trying to word it carefully.
For sure. We should know pretty soon though when the inactives come out.
Yeah. So what are we doing then with we're assuming he's out. Okay.
Yes. Definitely.
With that in mind, last week he was out, or sorry, week 17 he was out, and Le'Veon Bell intentionally was not featured. So you saw a lot of Williams, but was it Thompson or Williams? It was Thompson. Sorry, Darwin Thompson. Yeah. But this is a little bit different in a playoff situation. Like, is it going to be Bell or is it going to be Thompson? I'm of the belief that you're going to see a lot of Thompson again, as well as Le'Veon Bell.
And Darrell Williams. So this is, the way you just worked through that, I think tells the story. They've got options. Singletary was a big problem, but we kind of knew if we can't guarantee volume, but we could guarantee that if the Bills wanted to run the ball, it was going to be with him. This is a situation where Kansas City, they may just decide to throw it all the time. That's not to say that Bell can't catch the ball, but if they do run it, there are three guys that they are seemingly pretty comfortable giving some volume to. I think Thompson would probably take the back seat of the three, but there's no guarantee that anyone's going to get the lion's share. So I guess if I had to pick one, it would be Le'Veon Bell, just because he does have the dual threat ability. I also think the field, though, will probably overrate Edwards-Helaire going down. Oh, Lev Bell slides right in. I do not see that happening.
All right. Oh, and by the way, he is. It was a little while ago, Schefter tweeted. Earlier, I saw that he wasn't expected to play. Now he's confirmed out. So my fault on that one. Adam Schefter saying he is, in fact, out. What are we doing with the run game here, knowing that Clyde Edwards-Helaire is out? Alex, I know you said you had some of him coming into this 2-day slate. Do you have any lean one way or the other with Kansas City?
Yeah, I'm kind of in agreement with what Ben was saying, where like people are gonna think Le'Veon Bell is the guy just because he's got that brand name, but really there hasn't been a clear pecking order between the two throughout the season. It's kind of flip-flopped over time. I do think that whoever's playing better at the start of the game may be the one that gets the bulk of the work at the end of it. So that's kind of making me lean towards playing Darrell Williams, just because I feel like he'll be a little bit under-owned, while Le'Veon Bell will be a little bit over-owned. But then in my 4-game slate lineups, I pivoted to Leonard Fournette from Clyde Edwards-Helaire, just because I feel like it is pretty unclear which one of these guys is the best to target.
How's ownership looking like with these guys? Do we have it updated for no Clyde Edwards-Helaire yet?
Yep.
We do? Okay. So Bell, wow. Okay. So you have Thompson basically getting no ownership.
Yeah, Thompson's the third string guy, so I don't think he's going to really play.
Yeah. And then Williams is, where do we have him at? We have him around 17%. God, I don't know. Ben, this one's difficult for me. It's almost a stay away, because I have such a lack of confidence in anyone being involved, and I even feel like Thompson could get some involvement.
That would be surprising for me, to be honest.
If he got any involvement at all?
I mean, maybe a couple, but I think it'll be divvied up between Bell and Darrell Williams mostly. Are
either of them good enough today at their price points?
So I think this is a situation where you kind of have to embrace the 2-game slate. I think it's a very difficult situation. It's hard to gauge, but when you have a team with a 33-point implied total, again, there's just touchdowns to go around, and there's a chance that one of them falls in the end zone twice. So there's just merit to playing any guy on the Chiefs who's going to be involved, because there's just a lot of touchdowns to go around. But I'd be lying if I said one of these guys should have ample opportunities to pay off their tag. I honestly think that's a little overstated. I'd rather have Williams than Bell. That much I know.
Okay. Alex, I'm going to ask you, I know you said it's tough, but if you have to take one of these guys, who do you prefer? Is it Bell?
I prefer Williams. I think Bell projects a little bit better, but I do feel like the difference in ownership may be even bigger than we have on the ownership projections, just because right now we don't factor in that like name brand factor. So I just feel like more people know Bell than they know Williams.
All right. Well, let's move it on. We got 1 down, 2 to go, and 1 down, 1 to go on a 2-game slate. Man, we got 25 minutes, and then we're followed by Live Before Lock. So do not go anywhere. It is coming up right after us. Who do we have today? We got Josh Engleman's on the show. Okay.
3-man booth.
What's up?
It's a 3-man.
Yeah, I see that. Josh Engleman, Chris Spags, Matt Gajewski. That should be fun. All right, don't go anywhere. They're taking you up to that 305 lock. Let's move on to Tampa Bay and New Orleans. But before we do, if you guys haven't checked out awesemo.com yet, checked out all of the tools that we have to offer, I don't know what you're waiting for. From ownership to the projections to the boom bust tool to the top stack tool that we have for almost every sport that involves stacking in any form. For PGA content, not the top stack tool, we have PGA content, NASCAR, UFC, NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL, everything. All the preeminent stuff out there, all the tools created by Awesemo himself. You're looking at him right there. And all of these tools, not just created by him, but used by him to win all the money he has. I just saw a comment in chat that said, I see you in the top 10 all the time. Yep, that would be using the tools that we have on the site. So check it out. And look, we have weekly passes for $3.95 a week, express passes. You can get the express lineup builder, all of our showdown content, the express top stacks tool. We have monthly all access, annual. We have one sport, all sports, whatever you want, no matter what player you are. We've got something for everybody. Go to awesemo.com/join. And we've recently put together a ton of tutorials, videos that you can watch, articles that you can read to better understand how to use these tools if at first they're confusing to you. And if you have any questions about this stuff, you can hit me up on Twitter. My DMs are open at Loughran_D, LOUGHY_D. All right, Tampa Bay at New Orleans. The Tampa Bay Bucs, Ben, are 2.5-point dogs in a game with is it still 52? Sorry, 52.5 now. It moved up. They have a 25 implied total. Let's start with Tom Brady in a passing game that's been very difficult to figure out.
Yeah, I mean, listen, they throw the ball a lot, and that's a good starting point. But at the same time, the weapons, he likes to spread it around. Ton of talent on this Tampa team. It's the same story every week now. It seems like Evans is, for the field and how I would interpret it, probably the guy that people will be least likely to go to. He was banged up. He's the most expensive. I think Godwin and AB are more interest. But again, we've seen the Bucs and the Saints play twice already this year. A lot to go around. Very hard to distinguish. I think that Evans would probably be the leverage, but I also think he's the least likely to succeed. So it's kind of correlated in that regard.
Thank you to Nice Try 1996 for the super chat. He says, Alex, I hate to tinker, but I have Jones and Diggs. Is Brady worth throwing out or keeping?
Okay. Jones and Diggs. I'm a little confused because are there two Jones? Is this Ronald Jones?
That's what I was thinking.
Oh, no, it's Aaron
I
Jones.
thought you would know if I did.
Okay,
it's
Aaron Jones because Aaron Jones did pretty good. So I think Brady, overall, really solid play this weekend. I can't see any reason you wouldn't want him. The one thing I mentioned is you do want a couple of the pass catchers in that lineup. If you don't have room for that, it might be worth pivoting. But it looks like all the quarterbacks on today's slate, you need to stack. So I think that's perfectly fine. I don't see any reason to swap off.
All right, let's stay with you for a minute here, Alex, with Tampa Bay, talking about Tom Brady. They've faced New Orleans twice already this season. They've lost in both occasions. I saw something. There's always this thing where people say it's hard to beat a team 3 times in a year. And then it's like the last 25 times that happened, they've won 12 times. So it's not that hard. It's pretty much straight down the middle, pretty much a 50-50 shot of that happening. But Tom Brady and company have really struggled against this Saints team this season because when you get pressure on Tom Brady, things go poorly, and they were struggling to run the ball. But they have been running the football better lately. And I'd like to think that Bruce Arians and Byron Leftwich have figured something out to make it so we can get the ball out of Tom Brady's hands earlier when you have as many weapons as he does. Call me crazy, but I think Tampa Bay wins this game? I don't. I think it'll be competitive, and I think it's going to be lower scoring. But I don't think you're going to see the same struggles out of Tom Brady that we did in this matchup earlier this year. I think there are ways to fix this. I think they've already began to do that with getting a better run game going and getting the ball out of his hands earlier, which could make for a very interesting game and also makes Tom Brady a very interesting passing option on such a small slate.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that Tampa Bay loves to do is pass the football. They're one of the most pass-heavy teams in the league. So that gives a lot of confidence in the game where New Orleans is favored to win, that like we could see even more passing and maybe a situation similar to Buffalo yesterday if the game flow breaks a certain way. So I think Brady, I mean, he's had such big performances already. The Tampa Bay stack has won people a ton of money. It's pretty obvious. Like they have the upside. The matchup's negative, but the passing volume is really what's getting it done. And Evans and Godwin are on the field pretty much every play. They're really solid targets. The other guys are a little bit trickier with Antonio Brown only playing 60% of the routes last week. That was a little disappointing because I was thinking Evans being banged up would lead to Antonio Brown seeing more snaps, but I was wrong. So now I'm leaning more towards Brown being the third best. And then at tight end, I mean, Cameron Brate played more than Gronk last week. So that really shattered our expectations a little bit. So I'm even leaning a little bit more towards Brate than Gronk in this game.
All right. So chat's popping off right now. Cameron says, Brady hasn't been beaten by the same team 3 times in his career. GQ had a pretty decent answer. He said, of course, Brady didn't get beat by the Jets, Dolphins, or Bills 3 times in a year. Valid point. Hasn't exactly been the strongest division over the past couple of decades. Ultimately, Ben, the game is a 52-point total. It is projected to be pretty high scoring. Like I said, I think at 52.5, sorry. I think you could see it come in under that. What do you think what are you seeing as far as game flow is happening today?
Yeah, I mean, there's less variables. They're in the dome. They've seen each other. The total feels about right. I will say, though, it's not like if Tampa wins, I don't even call that an upset. They're a 2.5 point dog on the road. Like it's not this team has been crushed. Yes, they were dismantled by the Saints the last time they played. That means to me literally nothing. I'll be honest.
Nothing.
Really not relevant to what happens here. And Tampa, they have hit their stride. I kind of do think that they win the game. I hope they lose, but that's not really important for this. And Brady, it really seems, as Alex has talked about, like regardless of what happens with Tampa, they're going to be throwing the ball. If they're up, it's because they've scored by passing the ball, and they're going to continue to do that. If they're down, well, obviously they'll be passing the ball. So for the DFS side, you can load up on Brady. We have seen it starting with that. I feel like that Lions game was the catalyst when like $7 were somehow in the optimal. Tampa mega stacks have been very effective. And on a 2-game slate, you're going to see a lot of people go lean on Brady and pump up his receivers because, like Big Ben, he has no rushing ability. So for him to have a huge game, the receivers have to have a big game. He has no other out to get there.
So who are your favorite pass catching options from Tampa?
So it would be Godwin again, even though he's had disappointing drops. 12 targets against Washington seems like the most reliable when you look at everything. Price is more than reasonable. Antonio Brown, I'll be honest, I don't know what exactly to make of his role on this team. I feel like he should be more involved today, but we haven't seen that in some spots when I've kind of thought that. And then you've got Evans, Gronk. Again, we saw Brate take over the pass catching duties last week. Was that game plan oriented? Is there more to that? And then of course we can get to the backs with Fournette apparently getting the first crack at it.
Alex, who are your favorite pass catching options from the Bucs today? They got a lot of them. You mentioned Brate and Gronk talking about that situation. Do you have any clear favorites here? You're muted.
Thanks. Evans probably the best, but my favorite is Godwin just because I feel like he hasn't had those huge performances. That's going to draw all the ownership. And Brown's my least favorite just because I feel like he's not on the field as much as the other guys. And then a tight end, Brate is one of the better punt plays, but by no means a great play. Just kind of, you got to pick one, right?
Yeah. I'm with you guys on Godwin, though. I'm a Godwin truther.
You really are.
Oh, nice.
What'd you say?
I said you really are. You've been a Godwin truther from the beginning here.
He's good, man. I think he gets a bad rap. He scored in 4 straight games. He had a couple bad drops. You already mentioned it, Ben, but he's really good. He's amazing after the catch as well. There's a lot of things he can do to blow up. And I think you guys outlined it perfectly. I don't need to elaborate at all on this. It's Chris Godwin. His price is down. There's other ways you can go in this game. And, he's never going to be egregiously overowned. So I like it. What about the run game, Ben? This is tough, man. It looks like Ronald Jones has a good shot to play. Bruce Arians said that we will know soon, but it looks like he's shaping up to be a game time decision here. The tough part is Leonard Fournette starting, but if Ronald Jones plays, Arians said he's going to have his normal workload. But then in week 17, he said he wanted to feed the hell out of or give him a ton of work. I'm paraphrasing here for Ronald Jones. And then Ronald Jones ended up having like 9 carries or something. So I can't really trust any. I think he has 12 carries. It's hard for me to trust anything that Arians is saying right now.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me almost of the Chiefs situation. I think that they have options. And when you have options, it just ups the variance, because if Fournette gets the first crack and he does something stupid, he could never see the field again. They have that luxury. When you're the only guy, they don't have options. They have to give him the ball again. But I think that Fournette is probably your best bet, but by no means would I be shocked to see him take the first carry and then Ronald Jones to reassert himself or Vaughn to get involved. It's just a very tricky offense, and that's something that we just have to live with. You're not going to know. Doesn't mean they're not playable. There's just a lot of risk.
Alex, the run game for Tampa, it's a tricky situation here yesterday and today as well. What do you think?
I'm leaning a little bit more towards Fournette because we've seen the pecking order change throughout the year between these two guys, with Ronald Jones and Fournette, seemingly in unpredictable ways where, for example, week 2 and week 16, Fournette saw like way more carries than Ronald Jones, but in most of the weeks that wasn't the case. But the fact that the pendulum seems to have swung back to Fournette as the number 1 guy makes me feel a little more confident in him than Ronald Jones. I also like the fact that they like him as the pass catching back, which should be a fruitful role in a tough matchup versus New Orleans. So I think I was slightly leaning towards Fournette, but I feel like he's going to be a lot more popular too.
Okay. We got another super chat from Nice Try 96. Thanks, man. Coming in hot today. He said, I'm going with Diggs and Aaron Jones. My bad. You didn't have, I appreciate it, but that did not warrant another super chat, but we'll take it. I'm in on the, dude, you might have to send another one, because are you talking about the Browns or are you talking about Antonio Brown?
I think he's talking about, he had Brady. So I think he means he's paired him up with Antonio Brown, which that makes sense. You save some money. Brady, to have a big game, needs some pass catchers in that lineup for sure.
Okay. Because it said, I'm in on the Brown.
Well,
I like that.
Or the Brownies. Yeah. Maybe he's going to Baker and Crow. I don't know.
He's just still like stacking Cleveland, Tampa, and the Browns defense.
I'm thinking he's talking about saving money with the Browns defense. I don't know, man. So let's do Browns defense. I'm happy to. I said this to Ben yesterday. Like, I'm happy to punt any defense, but that scares the shit out of me. Like, that's a guaranteed -1. Maybe not. Really Maybe they get a pick 6. Who knows?
I think regarding his question, I think that Antonio Brown, I like him in a stack with Brady, because I feel like he may be the lesser likely to succeed of the wide receivers, but when he does, obviously Brady's going to have a big game. So I think that's solid.
All right, guys. One more team to go. Then we'll toss it over to the 3-man booth. Chris Spags, Josh Engleman, and Matt Gajewski taking you all the way up to 305. Time's flying when you're talking football. New Orleans, let's do it. And if you haven't hit that thumbs up yet, greatly appreciate it. We got over 2,000 watching, only 220 now likes. Help us out. Throw away another $20 super chat from Nice Try. Browns defense he's talking about. Subscribe and hit that thumbs up. It's greatly appreciated. Thank you to all that have done that and supported the channel all along the way. I got to answer the question. Browns defense, Alex.
Well, I think that the Browns defense is the most contrarian for the reason you mentioned, is they're probably going to give up a lot of points. But we thought that with Baltimore yesterday, and they put up 19. So not quite as much of a pick-heavy quarterback with Mahomes as Lamar Jackson is, but it can happen.
All right. Ben, it's time for New Orleans. Drew Brees, last game. Alvin Kamara coming back after a full week of practice that wasn't in his living room. Michael Thomas back after being on the IR. Second game back, for Michael Thomas. It looks like the pieces are coming together for the Saints at home in the Dome. Third time they faced a divisional opponent this season. The only news here, and it's kind of significant, Latavius Murray, you're not going to get him, and you're also not expected to get Taysom Hill. So is that huge? Is it massively fantasy relevant? Probably not, but does that mean that Alvin Kamara gets more opportunities on the ground? That's also possible. What are we thinking here?
Yeah, I mean, the problem is running against Tampa's front is not the recipe for success anyway, but it is good around the goal line. Kamara could pick up those carries. And yeah, the Saints are getting healthy in some regards at the right time. We've talked about Brees, Kamara, Michael Thomas, Traquan Smith is expected back, I believe. And that first thing that does, Deontay Harris is not, to me, in play anymore. He was a great value last week. I don't see that happening. I think some people may not be paying attention and may go back to him. I'm not going to do that. And it's kind of, again, like the Chiefs. You've got two big-time players with Michael Thomas and Kamara, and then you've got some punt plays, whether it's Sanders, Traquan Smith, Jared Cook, the secondary options for a prolific offense.
Someone asked if I had eyeliner on. No, I'm not wearing eyeliner. Maybe it's just the lighting. I don't know. Or maybe I'm wearing eyeliner. Alex, what are we doing with the New Orleans Saints, the big three here, really the big two in Alvin Kamara and Michael Thomas?
Yeah, I think that Taysom Hill being out really gives me more encouragement for pretty much everyone on this team, because it seems like he's always throwing a wrench in things. So I think Drew Brees maybe gets some short passing touchdowns, which we don't really see because of Taysom Hill. And Alvin Kamara probably gets some more goal line rushing attempts. And then Latavius Murray being out, that kind of solidifies Kamara's snap count, because I feel like they feel a lot less confident in Dwayne Washington than they do in Latavius Murray. So if this game is at all competitive, I think Kamara will play more than he normally does. So I think we got some really good fantasy options here.
Yeah, we do. Who are your favorite? Well, actually, before we do this, I want to talk about some of the peripheral guys. We still got plenty of time here before we turn it over. Alex, when it comes to Traquan Smith being activated from the IR, last week, more of a special teams guy, and Deontay Harris had a big 7 for 7 for 83 game in that easy win against Chicago. And then Jared Cook is kind of in the twilight of his career, but still a 7-target game, and is someone that can be featured in the end zone with 7 touchdowns on the season. What do you think about the non-big marquee names for the Saints today?
I think you guys called it that Traquan Smith being out throws a wrench in things for the wide receivers, where we don't really know where the work's going to go between him and Deontay Harris. So I'm off both of them. And then I kind of like Jared Cook, because Taysom Hill, like one of the spots he lines up is at tight end, especially closer to the goal. So I think maybe we'd see some more Jared Cook touchdowns than normal with Taysom Hill sidelined.
Ben, what about you?
Yeah, I think that, again, the Saints are a team healthy implied total, and they like to utilize guys, particularly tight ends, get creative. Jared Cook is someone reasonable, and if you're not going to pay all the way up for Kelsey, you're probably going to try to need to mitigate the gap in the points by a touchdown. Like, that is the one way you can keep pace, is if you fall in the end zone and Kelsey just has a normal game. He still probably outscores him in raw points, but that can be – and Traquan Smith is expected to play. I just see chat asking about that, and that could really make it confusing. And then I will say, even though likelihood of success is low, Emmanuel Sanders is just there. And on a 2-game slate, he's kind of like Higgins to me, in a way where it's just like a normal price tag. Nothing stands out about it. But you know what? He's part of an offense that can move the ball against Tampa's secondary. I feel confident about that. So if you're on the field for the Saints, I do think there's merit, and Sanders should have some opportunities.
I think so too. And you're getting him at a dirt cheap price. I was actually looking at this yesterday, Ben, where you have Sanders in that same price tier as Rashard Higgins, as Mecole Hardman, pretty similar to Demarcus Robinson as well, which makes it really interesting, because Sanders, his ownership, we got him coming in around like 23%. against this Tampa Bay pass defense. Hardman around 26%, Higgins around 23% as well, virtually the same as Sanders. And then Robinson is at like 17%. So many of them are so tightly grouped together, not only in salary, but ownership as well. It could make a huge difference in the final results is what I'm saying.
Huge difference. And I think that's on 2-game slates. It's little things like that where the edge is won. Obviously there's going to be a couple guys that have big games and you need them, but then you get into those situations, 3v3s, 2v2s, and that's the type of guy that raw points. If he can outscore Higgins and things like that, he will box out lineups that are 1v1s.
Alex, let's talk a little bit further about the run game here for New Orleans before we wrap this up. Alvin Kamara is the third highest price skill player on the slate, not including Patrick Mahomes. You've got Hill, Kelsey, and then Alvin Kamara. Is coming in underweight or in a single or 3 max, fading Alvin Kamara an approach that you're willing to entertain at all today?
Definitely, yeah. I don't think he's a lock to go off by any means, especially when you compare him to Kelsey and Hill, like your other spend up options. It's pretty much anyone's game who's going to have the bigger day between them. But I do feel like Kamara is in a fantastic spot solely based on these injuries where Taysom Hill gets those goal line touchdowns and Latavius Murray gets a lot of those power running attempts. So I see Kamara being featured a little bit more today, which should compensate for the tough matchup.
Nice try with another super chat. Says, thanks, guys. I appreciate the advice. Heading over to Indiana to make my bets. It's only 36-minute drive. Good lick today. Did you mean lick or did you mean luck?
And you don't have to super chat to answer. You could just let us know.
I know exactly what he meant.
Yeah, of course. Good luck. Win those bets. Indiana, they have betting. As more states are coming on, New York's going to have betting soon enough. Very excited.
Very exciting stuff. Ben, close us out with the run game here, and we'll do our top picks from this one and any props and bets we have for New Orleans and Tampa since we did them for KC and Cleveland.
Yeah, I mean, Kamara is going to have the opportunities. The luxury with him is even running against Tampa's front, he could be wildly unsuccessful and he can still get there because he has the chance to have 12 targets and 10 catches. That's just the way they can utilize him. I'm not sure exactly what they'll do behind him, whether it's Montgomery or something else. I don't think that's super relevant. Kamara should have a big time opportunity. It doesn't mean he's going to perform, but you have to imagine, regardless of game script, that he's heavily involved in the Saints offense.
All right, top options here. Alex, from this game, well, we already did Tampa. Top options from New Orleans, not just for the team, but in context to the entire slate, because you're going to have to pay for a couple of these, specifically Alvin Kamara.
I think Kamara is the guy I'd really prioritize given the injuries. But I mean, Michael Thomas, I think, is in a good spot, but like everyone's super amped up about the price tag. Emmanuel Sanders, I agree with Ben. I think he's a solid piece that may be just not very hyped up that could differentiate your lineup.
He just super chatted us again. He said, luck. I wish you the best of luck. Man. We appreciate all the support. That's amazing. All right. Ben, did I ask you for your top plays on the Saints yet? Nice try. Really threw me off my game.
Yeah. For me, it's nothing. I think Kamara is the guy that I would want. And then it's Jared Cook and Sanders. I think one of them, especially if you're putting Breeze at your quarterback, is the type of guy that really makes a nice complementary. It works out price-wise, works out ownership-wise. And those are the type of pieces I'm keying in to hopefully make a little difference on a 2-game slate where that's hard to come by.
All right. Do you have any bets? Do you guys have any bets or any props for our sponsor as we close this one out? No House Advantage. All of the props. It's a peer-to-peer prop betting app on the App Store, Google Play, whatever. You just download it at No House Advantage. It's pretty spectacular, and all of the projections that we have are totally free to help you win a lot of money there. Use the promo code Awesemo, sign up, get $20 when you deposit, get another $5 when you refer a friend. But you can use No House Advantage and the projections that we have entirely free, not just at No House Advantage, but also to place bets, kind of double up, Ben. Any props that you think really stand out today at No House Advantage that we can hit on before we turn this over?
So I will say, just looking at Odd Shopper, one prop is just Alvin Kamara. I've said a couple of times now, I don't think he can run against the front. His receptions prop is 5.5 at plus 120 for the over. To me, he has a very real opportunity to clear that hurdle, get 6 or more. There's also some 4.5s out there. Obviously, you're laying a lot of juice. But to me, Alvin Kamara is going to catch a lot of passes today. And that's something I'd look to on prop sites like No House Advantage.
All right, Alex.
It's funny. I see Ronald Jones. He's projected like he's the workhorse back on No House Advantage with over under 60 rushing yards. So I would definitely take the under. That being said, I'm kind of like rethinking my Leonard Fournette versus Ronald Jones take, because it seems like everyone's going to Fournette, and Fournette is 25% owned, where Ronald Jones is around 1%. So I'm kind of tempted to just late swap where I have the extra money to Ronald Jones somewhere in between now and when that game starts.
Love it. Stick around, guys. Coming right up, it is Live Before Lock. Spags, Josh, and Matt Gajewski. They got you covered all the way up till 3:05. Best of luck today. And if you hit anything big, be sure to hit us up on Twitter. Let us know. We love to see that stuff. At Jazzrez DFS, at Awesemo DFS, myself at Laffy_D, and Awesemo at Awesemo_com. We'll see you guys back here soon.
Good stuff, guys. We fucking killed it. Later. Thanks, Jordan.
Is it beer o'clock already, Josh?
It's 2:00 on a Sunday.
Jeez, God, hitting the bag early on a Sunday.
Liverpool played Manchester United today, man. I've been drinking since 11:30.
What's up, Matt? This is our first show. I'm glad to be doing this with you, buddy.
Chris, good to meet you, my man.
Any Four Locos for the show?
Now, I'm hungover a little
today.
from yesterday.
No Four Locos today. Sunday, we keep it clean, man. We keep it clean on Sunday.
It's fair.
Straight tuna. Yeah, let's do it.
I don't understand why this person always thinks that the video isn't working. Incredible.
What's up, everyone? We are live for the home stretch. It is almost the last 2 games of the divisional playoff round, the last major full game slate we're going to have before the conference championship. So enjoy your NFL while you have it. I'm Chris Spags, joined first of all by a man you've seen a lot on the channel, a man who's made people a lot of money, a man you know and love. He's Matt Gajewski. How you doing, Matt?
I'm doing fantastic. Games yesterday maybe didn't go according to plan. One bet I thought was a surefire lock was Devin Singletary's rushing prop, the over that is, and going like he had 1 rush attempt, I think, at halftime. That prop certainly did not hit. So we're getting back after today, my man. But it's good to finally be on a stream with you.
Yeah, me and Matt have been 2 star-crossed lovers not doing streams for a while, so I got to make sure to give the guy some love, doing a great job, both for NFL analysis, for our college products as well. Matt's a guy to watch here. And another guy who's okay is Josh Engleman. How you doing, Josh?
That's just brutal, man. It's a terrible introduction. Incredibly unprofessional of you. I think that we should take that up with HR at a later date. I'm actually okay-ish. Liverpool picked up the draw with Man U earlier today. Not the ideal outcome. Dominated possession, but that's not what anybody cares about, because today is an NFL Sunday and not an early morning soccer slate.
Hey, you know what? You can have a little bit of both here on Awesemo, where we cover every sport we can. And of course, part of the way that we're able to do that is thanks to our sponsors over at No House Advantage. They're not a brand new sponsor anymore, but they might be brand new to you because they're taking a different spin on daily fantasy sports by offering player prop contests across the NBA, MLB, NFL, PGA, really all the sports out there for big cash prizes. Go over there. We have projections on the site. They're going to help you understand what props have the best chance of hitting relative to the odds they're giving you over at No House Advantage. It's going to make it easy for you, and playing on these smaller sites that are trying to get people like you in the door are a great way to build your bankroll. Let's go over to No House Advantage and then use the promo code Awesemo. They'll match up to $20 in your deposit. You can also refer friends to get deposit bonuses as well. So lots of ways to build your bankroll over at No House Advantage with the prop betting that we talk about on here. So go play, use that promo code Awesemo. And let's talk real fast because a lot of people are going to have some dead lineups that, in this 4-game slate going into yesterday. Some plays there, maybe a little bit underowned relative to what they should have been. John Brown, a guy people were terrified of after he put up a 0 last week. He ends up being one of the better value plays. Some other spots as well that maybe underperformed. Lamar Jackson, an injury. If you have him at QB, you're probably done, but maybe some ways to at least try to get close to the cash line. So Josh, I'll ask you first here. Is there anything you would recommend for the folks with the 4-game slate? Is there a bit of an edge you see for today to try to swap to, or obviously the late swaptimizer on Fantasy Crunch are another thing people could do, but anything in particular you want to bring if somebody's, kind of hand monitoring all these lineups?
You should absolutely be looking at every single lineup, or at least using late swaptimizer heading into this slate. There's no reason that you should go immediately with whatever it is that you had heading into yesterday. You have additional information. You should factor that information in and build your lineups accordingly. If you're playing 150, that's probably going to be via late swaptimizer and FC. If you've only got, you played like a 3 max or a 5 max, even if you played 20 lineups, like I would go through every single one of those by hand to just see like, okay, this particular player didn't do very well. So this kind of behind the 8 ball, I'm going to get rid of insert chalky player X to grab a little bit of leverage over the field and try to increase my upside on a lineup. Because if you're behind right now in a lineup, it's not going to get you anywhere to play the chalk across the board. You're never going to catch up. Somebody's going to be ahead of you. So you need to make a switch somewhere to give up ownership for some potential upside. You got to keep looking at your lineups, or at the very least, use late swaptimizer, which you should do. Thanks, Fantasy Cruncher.
Matt, how about you? How are you feeling here? Obviously we talked about Devin Singletary, another guy who kind of surprisingly underowned relative to the backfield for Buffalo yesterday. So maybe not a guy that people are worried about too much, but other plays for today, Matt, that I think people might be worth swapping to. Anybody come to mind as having a much better outlook than they might have had yesterday?
I think the Chiefs backfield is one first and foremost. And I think because the uncertainty there, people just aren't sure if it's going to be Le'Veon Bell. They aren't sure if it's going to be Darrell Williams. They aren't sure of the breakdown of the carries between those backs. Taking a stab on one of them, I personally don't necessarily know which one it's going to be. I have a slight lean towards Darrell Williams because he could let you get up to some other studs if you're doing 2v2s. And you could also look to Tampa Bay with Rojo coming into the game questionable. He's been already listed as the backup at the most. They're going to start Leonard Fournette. So if Rojo ends up playing in this game, you could take a look at him as maybe a contrarian play that people will not be on.
So yeah, there were 2 injuries to note here. Clyde Edwards-Helaire not expected to play. So that's going to open up some opportunity theoretically. And I guess this is what we can open up with, because I'm curious your guys' thoughts. Le'Veon Bell, Darrell Williams, whatever you want to call him, the mentor, as some may love to call him on social media. 2 guys competing for that backfield. And we've seen kind of different results with them throughout the year in games without Edwards-Helaire, where we saw one game where Bell led the backfield in a clear-cut way. The last game that people may be looking at was when Kansas City played Atlanta. And we started with Le'Veon Bell getting carries and ended up being more of a Darrell Williams game. So Matt, you have a lean here. I know you mentioned the value. Obviously, these guys aren't priced the same. So maybe there's a little more DFS logic going to Williams, but it wouldn't surprise me to see Bell get that first look, get the first opportunity. And if he runs good, I find it hard to believe they would take him off the field. This is sort of what you would think they got him for. So if you had a lean, I guess, accounting for price and all of that as well, Matt, who would you want to go with?
That's my lean too. I do think they brought in Bell for a reason. They probably weren't expecting to lose Edwards-Helaire, but I think they wanted to at least spell Edwards-Helaire down the stretch with someone like Le'Veon Bell, who has a full skill set. We've seen him as a receiver throughout his time in the NFL. With that said, if you're playing just the pure leverage game, if you faded Diggs, you faded Akers, and you just need someone in your lineup to gain that ground, I do like going all the way down to Darrell Williams. He's less likely to score more points, but there is a chance. And if that chance occurs and you make that swap, it could save you.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And Josh, I'm going to ask you too, because you are a man who cares more about the prices. And we look just purely at the Awesemo projections we have, which of course everybody can get for themselves at awesemo.com/join. We do have a slight lean towards Bell, but I think Alex just sort of, my guess based on the projections, just sort of throwing his hands up and saying, we really don't have a great read. These guys both have shown some reasons to believe they could be a lead back, or at least end up in the lead share of the touches. So which way would you want to go, Josh, between Bell and Darrell Williams?
I have more Bell than Williams, but I don't think it really matters because I have way more of both of those guys than the field does by like multiples. That is coming from me having a relatively low amount of Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. So I don't have a ton of Browns right now, and I don't really have any other places to give running back exposure. If you try to fade the backfield for Cleveland, you run out of bodies pretty quickly. So I actually have a very large stance on Le'Veon Bell and Darrell Williams, to the point where I don't really care who it ends up being, because I'm so far above the field on both guys that I'll succeed either way.
All right, so there's one spot.
If they succeed, at least they could also just be awful.
Yes, that there are some ways here that things could go south, especially given the fact that the Chiefs certainly a pass-heavy team who are going to have the pick of the litter, really, of what they want to attack today. One other spot that I think we should talk about up top, too, Latavius Murray, Taysom Hill, two guys expected to be out. I don't think they've been officially rolled out, but the wind seemed to be blowing that way. And Josh, I think to me, this does make Alvin Kamara and Michael Thomas more necessary pieces than I would have thought they would have been. Obviously, guys who have big shares of the New Orleans really offense overall, the touchdowns, Kamara in particular all year long. Thomas, we saw getting back last week, a lot of targets. And I think just at the goal line, when you don't have Taysom and you don't have Murray, I find it hard to believe you're not going to go more to Kamara and Thomas. So, Josh, does that change anything for you? Are you forcing a little more exposure to those guys, or were you just getting enough anyway that it doesn't matter?
I have a ton of Kamara, no surprises there. I don't have as much Michael Thomas as I was totally expecting. Pretty much just neutral with the field. And I mentioned it to you before we started this show. I guess I haven't said it to the actual show themselves. I'm not playing on DraftKings today. I'm only talking from a FanDuel perspective, which is a perspective that we don't normally give on these shows. So if you are playing on FanDuel, I'm speaking to you today. I'm basically neutral on Michael Thomas. I'm neutral to a lot of the wide receivers in general. I was a little surprised that I didn't get to more, but it's just the Tampa Bay Bucs complicate matters by having multiple guys that seem to be the exact same person from a projection standpoint. So I'm happy to get Michael Thomas, but I think Kamara is the guy that really stands out. Although if I'm the Saints, I assume that there's some like random guy that's going to vulture a touchdown. I don't know his name yet. We probably don't know his name, but he will get a touchdown at some point in time just to ruin everything for the Kamara people.
Matt, how are you feeling here about New Orleans? And again, just a more constricted workload potentially with no Murray. And then again, with no Taysom Hill, just taking the little dink and dunks. And I guess you could also make a case it could benefit Drew Brees a little bit more, though. We could see how his various injuries piling up throughout the year continue to affect him. So Matt, how are you doing this? How are you approaching the Saints overall, I guess? And are you getting more of these guys than you might've thought have gotten yesterday?
So initially I had more Michael Thomas, and it was more of a price point thing with just having the cheaper backs being available. Some of my lineups, a good amount of them have already played Singletary, and depending on the pieces I have around Singletary, I will be making swaps. They likely are not going to get to a lot of Kamara. So when we talk about ownership, I mean, we have the 2-game ownership for us right now, but we kind of got an idea based on what we saw yesterday. And some of the players I thought would be a little highly owned, like Devin Singletary himself, came in right around 30%, depending on your contest. So I have some ground to make up. Because of that, I think I will be pivoting away from Kamara in some spots I have him towards some other expensive players, and then looking to punt that running back position with some uncertainty.
Okay, so there's some of the main news that's out there right now, and I guess we could talk a little more about the overall slate. But make sure you guys hit that like button. Josh, I feel like Laffy and really not doing his job. I know this is more of your spot, your beef with him. So please put him in his place and tell the people out there why they should hit that like button right now.
You should hit the like button because we're better than Laffy, and that should just be the immediate place that we start this conversation. But getting likes is fun. It's a badge of honor. I like getting more than everyone else. And now we're in the perfect opportunity with the highest amount of viewership that we've had so far. Yeah, that's the most. The guys before us didn't get that. We did. So reward us by hitting that thumbs up. You guys can subscribe to the channel too. We would like to get to 50K by the Super Bowl. So that is helpful as well. But it's really easy to find that thumbs up that's underneath the video. Hit that and you don't have to worry about it again.
There you go. And Laffy is probably just too busy putting on that eyeliner. I feel like it makes his eyes pop, but it's just, there's only so many hours in a day. You can't be doing that all the time, Laffy. That's what I'd say to him.
Exactly.
Let's talk about the QBs though, because there is one QB who is, I think, a cut above the rest, but also priced accordingly. Patrick Mahomes, we all know the deal by now. He's fantastic. I think you could also make the case this year, probably not showing as much as he may have shown. They won the Super Bowl last year. They didn't want to go undefeated. It seemed didn't push that too much. I really think that they could have really been a historic offense, but instead we just have Mahomes being as great as he is, going against a Cleveland team that on this short slate, especially defensively, not showing a lot. Last week, I think you can argue they got a lot of lucky breaks. No offense to our Cleveland fans out there, of which there are many, But I think, that game last week we saw in the back half, what happens if you really attack Cleveland, which has been throwing for 500 yards, really stumbling kind of ass backwards into that big number. So Matt, how are you feeling about Mahomes at this price point where he is so expensive, but at the same time, in terms of pure ceiling, in terms of also the floor, I think you can argue he really should be the guy you have more than anybody else by a wide margin.
Right. And if you look at our top stacks tool, if you were looking at it yesterday, we had him about 20% owned, just north of that. And then the chance he would be the top stack on the week was over 40%. So you were doubling up that chance of actually earning the top stack compared to the field if you just played Mahomes. Now, coming into today, we have more information and accurate information. Some of the signal callers yesterday were not as owned as I thought. You had Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, and Aaron Rodgers all below 20% given, depending on the contest, but most of the contests I've looked at, they came in around there. To me, that says that you're going to get a lot of ownership today on Mahomes. If you're playing the 2-game slate, you're going to see a ton of ownership there on Mahomes. So can you gain leverage by playing one of these other players? Can you play a Brady or a Breeze? And I personally think you can, just looking at the overall game environments. Of course, that Kansas City game has a total that is just to the moon, but you still have a 52 total in that Tampa Bay New Orleans game. A lot of points expected to be scored there. So those are pivots I am comfortable making, and it's an ownership thing.
Josh, how are you feeling about Mahomes here? You're playing on FanDuel mostly, but he's going to be very expensive on both sides by a wide margin, and still the same prospects on there. So how are you handling him on FanDuel? And do you have any sort of lean like Matt does, where a lot of people out there, a lot of sharp players will tell you maybe it's worth looking the other directions, but just on a pure projection basis and on the upside, Mahomes is still going to be the top dog.
Yeah, I think he's unequivocally the top quarterback today. And I think that everybody would agree with that. That's why his ownership is so high. Whether that means you should be rostering him in the GPP is a bit of a different discussion. I am still, at least with the field, I'm slightly north of it right now. I think the real key piece is what you do with your second option. I mean, if you're playing multiple lineups, in fact, if you're playing one lineup, clearly you're going to have 100% to someone. But I think getting the other 3 guys right is the more important piece than betting on Mahomes, because we all think that Mahomes is going to have a big day. So currently I'm betting on Drew Brees over Brady and Mayfield. I'm not super comfortable with that, but I had Brees come out a little bit further ahead than Tom Brady when I ran through some of my data. They have basically the same ownership on FanDuel. So I basically bumped Brees up a half tick, took Brady down a half tick. So I'm very minimal on Brady and Mayfield. It's all Brees and Mahomes for me.
Matt, if you had to go to a number 2 QB, would you also go Drew Brees? Because, we talked about the Murray absence, the Taysom Hill absences. At least those are expected right now. I think I agree with Josh. I think Brees would be my number 2 QB. I've heard a lot of love for Tom Brady, and it does make sense. He hasn't lost to a divisional rival 3 times in a year. I get that, though. As they mentioned on the show before us on the deeper dive, he's also been playing a lot of AFC East teams previously, so that's not going to lend a lot here to even the chance to play a team 3 times in a year. But I think Brees, just this Tampa Bay team, we know it's hard to run on them. We know New Orleans is going to find ways to get creative. We've seen them in the past, a lot of dump downs to Alvin Kamara in the flats. I think Brees is my number 2, Matt, but how about you? How would you rank these guys?
I would say Brees is close with Brady, but I also do prefer Brees in that spot. And it's mainly a price thing. Like Josh said, I don't see a big difference between these players. And we can look back at the previous games. It's funny because neither of them actually played that well. Brees had a lot of touchdowns, but his yardage was really low. And that's because Tom Brady turned the ball over so many times. He had 5 interceptions combined in the 2 previous matchups, which just torpedoed the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense entirely. Now, heading into this particular game, I think we have a healthier signal caller in Tom Brady, who's obviously playing like with his hair on fire right now. But at the same time, Drew Brees coming in a little bit cheaper, looking on the full body of work this season. I do think they're a similar play, and you get Brees at a cheaper price.
All right, so let's jump back to that top owned QB. And again, if you guys are just tuning in, make sure you hit that like button. And of course, subscribe, hit the notification bell. We'll have NBA content coming up, a showdown, live before lock coming up later. So there's always tons going on here on the Awesemo YouTube channel. So make sure you are subscribed and notified whenever we have something going on. The top option, the top pass catcher, it looks like, and really, logically makes a lot of sense in terms of ownership. Travis Kelce going to be Patrick Mahomes' most owned target. That said, I know some people are afraid of Denzel Ward. I heard the YouTube chat talking about that earlier. And Tyreek Hill going to be running out of the slot. So I actually don't anticipate him seeing that much Denzel Ward. Not that Ward is one of those guys I would fear anyway. But Tyreek Hill, I feel like he may end up lower owned than he should be. Just what we know of his upside. We've seen it sporadically this year. Obviously, the game against Tampa Bay day where he put up the 60 fantasy points going to be the most noteworthy one. But I think this Cleveland team is so bad that I want to get more Hill than I think people are going to be comfortable with. And still getting a lot of Kelsey, Matt, but how are you handling these guys? Are you trying to force your way to both, or are you making a choice for one or the other? And if so, who wins the Sophie's choice between Tyreek and Travis Kelce?
It's mostly forcing one or the other. And it's not even a function of them being bad individual plays, or I think one of them has an edge. We do have very cheap options in this offense, which we'll get to. So when I'm running double stacks, I think you get more viable long-term lineups with better overall plays if you play one of the punts rather than playing them both. When you decide between Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill, I always have a slight preference towards Kelce because he's filling the tight end spot. And the tight end spot is just so atrocious. There's not another player outside of, Kittle and Waller, and we don't have them here with that ceiling. I mean, you could always punt with like someone, maybe Austin Hooper, but in that case, you're not really betting on Austin Hooper himself. I think you're betting on Travis Kelce failing to hit his ceiling. With that said, Kelsey's generally the one I prefer, but absolutely no qualms with getting to Tyreek Hill.
Josh, are you on the same page here where Matt's right? There is a lot of opportunity cost if you just don't go to Kelce and he puts up, a standard day for him, which is 20 fantasy points, we could say. And, you go to Hooper and, even if he has a solid day, might not even be able to get to Kelsey's floor. So Josh, how are you handling this? Are you also in the camp that it just makes more sense to take Kelce, or are you willing to get a little bit different and try to get more Tyreek?
I would like to have a conversation and maybe take a straw poll on how many people know what Sophie's choice means.
Do you think we could do that? On the YouTube chat, probably not the highest.
Yeah, we're going to go with a flat 0 on that one. No, I mean, I'm smashing Travis Kelce. I'm a bit over the field. I have him in like 2/3 of my lineups. He's just not comparable to anybody else at the tight end position. He's basically projected 4 points on FanDuel than every other tight end. You can take 2 tight ends and jam them into one Travis Kelce spot. Like if you were allowed to do that, you'd still be better off taking Travis Kelce. That's how much better he projects. He's a wide receiver that just has a different designation. It's silly to me, but it happens. So I'm getting to a lot of Travis Kelce. I'm getting to like a mild amount of Jared Cook, basically with the field, and then I'm kind of avoiding the heavy chalk from Austin Hooper. Still have him, but I'm at about half the field. I don't really have much interest in any of the other tight ends. It would take a truly massive day from like a Gronk or a Cameron Brate. You're probably going to need 2 touchdowns from one of these randos to really matter in this slate. So I'm just going to bet on Travis Kelce's like full-on 17-point fantasy projection. If he hits his median outcome, that's good enough for me.
Also, John Emerson in the YouTube chat saying that Sophie had to choose which child to save, and she chose her son. So flexing on you, Josh. There you go. Now we know. Yes, so that is in fact a reference. There you go. A couple other people getting it. It's a joke, guys. Honestly, never a chat that's meaner to us who also is so offended. It's really a special breed here on the Sunday Live Before Lock, guys. But we still appreciate you all being here. Maybe not Josh.
No. If these were behind the paywall, it would be awesome.
Matt, how are you feeling about the other tight end options? Because you mentioned it, there isn't a Waller on the slate, and really, any sort of data you'd look at, the boom bust tool on Awesemo would be the same thing. Where week after week, you see Kelce, you see Waller not far behind, and maybe you see Mark Andrews pop up, but there aren't these guys here. But one you could make a case for, who did see a lot of work last week, and we do see the work tend to constrict, as Alex often points out, Awesemo points out. In the playoffs, you're going to your guys you trust, and Austin Hooper does seem to be a guy that Cleveland trusts here. And a matchup against Kansas City where they've had one weak spot. It has been defending the tight end on the year, giving up about 1.7 yards per route covered, which is not a perfect stat, but that is one on PFF that I do like to look at to get a read on things. Hooper is the one guy I feel most comfortable with if I'm not going to Kelce, Matt. But obviously it's all relative to ownership, and it does seem like it's the wise move to go to Kelce. But how much Hooper do you anticipate having relative to Kelce?
I'll have a good amount of Hooper. I think it's fine getting to Hooper. I mean, if you're just looking at tight ends that are likely to see some volume today, he fits the mold. In the last 3 games, he has target counts of 15, 5, and 11. Cleveland's a team that uses a lot of 12 personnel. I was actually really interested to see David Njoku's status, and then we got Rap Sheet tweeting this morning that he's likely to play. If Njoku was out, I would like to take a look at Harrison Bryant's, but I think with the 3 of them, you likely get Njoku and Bryant splitting that extra tight end snap. With Hooper, I think we should be a little bit cautious of his tight end targets of late. There was a huge COVID outbreak with Cleveland down the stretch. Not only was Harrison Bryant on the COVID list for a period of time, but you guys all remember the week they lost almost all of their receivers. Hooper had a lot of targets that week. So with everybody back healthy, I'm not 100% sure we see the 15 and 11 target games for Hooper. So if you're like Josh said, if you're looking to just fade some high owned chalk at a position that carries a lot of variance, that could be a strategy with Hooper. As far as other tight ends to look at, Cameron Brate ran more routes and saw more targets than Gronk, which is really interesting. I don't know if it's going to continue. He's low owned. It's a good passing offense. That could be another direction you look.
Is there another tight end, Matt, that jumps out to you as being worthwhile here? Because, Gronk, I think there's always, again, we talked yesterday with John Brown, where you put up that 0 last week. People are terrified to go back the following week. And that's just not how football works for the most part, especially, in these fields where for the most part, people are looking at the box scores and afraid of it. Are you willing to go to a Gronk? Are you willing to go to a Jared Cook or even a Cameron Brate, who is a value price? And we saw last week, did get more of the tight end actual pass catching work relative to Gronk. Are these guys appealing at all, or is it mostly a Kelsey or a Austin Hooper situation?
They're appealing in large field tournaments. I think if you're correlating with your quarterback, it makes even more sense. Right now, I think the ones that are coming in with the lowest ownership, Cameron Brate makes a lot of sense. It's 3%. To my knowledge, there's no injury situation with Gronk that we at least know about. So his role has been slowly shifting, and down the stretch, heading into the playoffs, they've been using him more as a blocker. And we're seeing that with Brate now running more routes and seeing more targets. Of course, this could flip at any point in time, which makes Gronk a decent pivot if you're looking for another player with low ownership. I just find it interesting that Cameron Brate is 10% less owned in our current Awesemo ownership projections compared to Gronk. Jared Cook's not someone I have a ton of interest in. I think you could just get a larger leverage score on ownership if you take one of these other tight ends.
No, that makes some sense. And yeah, projection wise as well, Austin Hooper is a grade above both Gronk, Brate, actually not both, but really everybody else. Gronk, Brate, Jared Cook, Adam Troutman, the infamous Adam Troutman. So there is a lot of logic here in going to Hooper, and then Travis Kelce going to be 2x the projection, more than that of Austin Hooper. So that's sort of why these guys are saying it as it is. And one way that you can always know that is using that data at Awesemo, at awesemo.com/join. Check out all of our packages. No promos going right now, but always worth having the data here, especially for the home stretch of NFL. Wide receivers, another thing to talk about. We talked a little bit about Tyreek, but there are some other options. And I think the Tampa Bay one is probably the most interesting one to unpack here, where you have a bunch of guys projected similarly. The ownership currently, it seems on DraftKings, at least, going to Chris Godwin. Really, Mike Evans underrepresented, it seems to me, Matt. So I'm curious your thoughts on Tampa Bay's receivers here, where, theoretically there's more production to be had, though people may be afraid of the Mike Evans, Marshawn Lattimore matchup. That's been tough for him in the past, but I think maybe not as bad this year. So what are you getting out of the pass catchers here for Tampa Bay?
This is a tough spot, and I don't think it's because they don't have the upside or anything like that. There's just 3 of them, and people don't know who to play. And sometimes that leads to lower ownership in a spot where we still do have a dynamic passing offense. So certainly a spot I want to get to. We saw Godwin lead the team in targets last week. He had 12. He also led the team in raw target share in healthy games this year at 18.9%. So Godwin is someone I particularly like, but if you're playing the leverage game, Mike Evans certainly gives you that. His target share was just south of what we saw Chris Godwin come in at, 10 targets last week. I think you could certainly look to both. And because we get Evans, who he's broken records for like cumulative 1,000-yard seasons to start his career. Anytime you get a player like that, lower owned, I'm definitely going to roster him. Antonio Brown's a little more up and down. He had a 14 target game to close out the regular season. But if you watch that game, Tom Brady was literally giving him these little shuffle passes so he could hit a $250K bonus in his contract. I think it's mostly Evans and Godwin for me.
Josh, how are you feeling about the Tampa Bay receivers here? We do have, again, mostly flat ownership, but I think, leaning a little bit heavier towards Chris Godwin. So what are you getting the most of? And relative to ownership, do you have a stronger feel for any of them than the others?
Apparently I'm getting the most of the thumbs down button on this video today. Woof. Woof. It looks like the bots and the fun people that think we aren't the best in the world at what we do are out in full droves today. So I appreciate you guys. Little do you know that thumbs down is actually just as helpful as the thumbs up. So thank you very much for the increased engagement. What are we talking about? Bucs receivers? Yeah, I can handle that. Antonio Brown, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. Of the 3, Godwin is the guy that I have the least of. Mike Evans, the guy that I have the most of. And that's pretty much just because he's the least owned on FanDuel. I don't really know how to shake out those 3 guys right now. So I'm just flipping ownership on its head. I'm getting to more Mike Evans. I'm pretty neutral to Brown, and I'm most under the field on Chris Godwin.
So those are the Bucs receivers for you. And I think the other question we have to ask here is for Tampa Bay, really at running back, where we're going to see Leonard Fournette at least start the game. Bruce Arians has kind of done some double speak here where he said that Ronald Jones will at some point get in and we'll see his full workload, whatever that means. But Fournette getting the first start. And Matt, this is a spot against New Orleans has not been the most profitable for running backs overall. We're also going to get our 100-yard TD pick coming up in a second here. So we'll do that, but just want to try to cover Tampa Bay as much as we can. How are you handling the running situation here? Because Fournette, to me, I think looks appropriately owned. I don't want to go crazy there. I think there's enough risk that Jones comes in and is effective, but also I don't want Jones really because of what we saw last week where he didn't end up playing despite being a very popular play. So how are you feeling about the running backs for Tampa Bay and a tough spot against New Orleans' defense?
It certainly is a tough spot. I think I'm just going to roll with Fournette. His ownership is not egregiously high, and we do know that he's at least healthy and can play in this game. So we're talking like 25% ownership on the 2-game slate, which is ridiculously low. For comparison's sake, Alvin Kamara is north of 50%. So if you play someone like Leonard Fournette right away, you are already being contrarian enough just by taking a stab on the Tampa Bay backfield. If you're on the 4-game slate and you're completely dead, I think going to Ronald Jones does make some sense just from a flyer standpoint. If Leonard Fournette were to come into the game and fumble on his first carry or fumble on the first drive, I think you could see a lot of Ronald Jones. But right now, it does set up, in my opinion, based on what we know about the injury situation for Fournette to handle most of it.
All right, so let's do the 100-yard and TD picks. And people, our boy Screed in the chat, sending in a super chat, asking for it to be money time. Frankly, I'm not feeling the love here enough for money time, which I don't want to do it badly. But for Screed, for the people out there who need it in their lives, here is the money sign hat. So please, there's the cash register sound as well that Jordan will give you guys. But I have to say, my heart's not in it today when you guys are just being bullies in there, especially whatever. There's enough people out there being jerks. Josh, you want to say something?
Yeah, I do want to say something. I was really excited that we were going to avoid this hat nonsense today. And then here we are. You're still doing it anyway. I thought you were going to hold strong and just not do it.
I just need to make clear that my heart isn't fully in it today. So if it doesn't go well, it's the only reason why. But the 100-yard and a TD pick, that time of the week where unfortunately we don't have Greg to explain the rules, but I feel like given the slate, given the fact that it's just 2 games, Josh, I think we should just go pick whatever you want out of this one besides the Chiefs receivers. So knowing that, Josh, who would
no
be
Kamara either.
Yeah, or Kamara. So those 3. So no Kelsey, no Hill, no Kamara. Besides those guys, who's your 100-yard and a TD pick?
Man. So all of my relatively highly owned options are all guys that I shouldn't name. It's like Le'Veon Bell, Hardman, Rashard Higgins, like a bunch of guys that are not going to make me feel all that happy. So I need to take a stand on someone that's going to be fun. What will make me the most money? 100 yards and a touchdown today for Le'Veon Bell.
Ooh, I like that pick, actually. We gave the logic before, but tell people what's putting you on Le'Veon Bell the most.
6K price tag on FanDuel doesn't hurt, but honestly, when push comes to shove, it doesn't really matter to me what his projection is right now. We have him projected for relatively low ownership. We also have Darrell Williams projected for relatively low ownership. And I see one of the few ways to really get different on a 2-game slate on FanDuel to be going over the field on both of those guys. So Le'Veon Bell is winning sort of by default in this game. I think that the ownership of Chubb and Hunt being in the mid 40s is problematic for the way that the most likely game script goes for the Chiefs and Browns. So if that's the case, and I don't think that they can be there, especially Chubb at 8,200, then I have to allocate my ownership somewhere. And the first place that it's going is Le'Veon Bell with Edwards-Helaire out. So 6K Le'Veon Bell, 100 yards and a touchdown. Print me some money.
All right, Matt, how about you? Who do you want here with the caveat that you cannot pick Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, or Alvin Kamara?
So how does this game work?
It's just whoever gets 100 yards and a touchdown. So it's really, there's no stakes here. I mean, we're not going to punish you. And
pride.
Maybe Josh wants to. I don't know. Maybe the chat wants to. Want to punish us and flog us publicly if we don't get it right.
The chat punishes me enough, and most of the time it's deserved. And lucky for me today, usually the guy I like to tout for the Chiefs is Sammy Watkins because he gives you so much leverage and he's a cheap attachment to Patrick Mahomes. And then he comes out and generally breaks my heart every single week. So we don't even have to have that discussion, but I want to have a similar one. And, I was initially going to talk about a player prop that I really liked. Mecole Hardman going over 34.5 receiving yards. We have a sample without Sammy Watkins this year. Mecole Hardman didn't run as many routes as Demarcus Robinson. but Mecole Hardman was more targeted in that span. Cross-reference with our projections on Awesemo, he is the next highest projected receiver behind Tyreek Hill, of course. So I was going to say I like his prop, but if you want to go all the way up to 100 yards and a touchdown, I mean, the people probably need leverage today. They need some cheap plays. Let's go with it.
All right, so that's an interesting one, and certainly a guy's going to get a boost in opportunity and can be really make a day for you in just one or two plays. I'm going to go now that Matt set the bar. Josh said it appropriately, then Matt came in like a superhero with a ballsy pick, but I'm going to go one that I just feel like is the strongest play overall at a not crazy price point. Michael Thomas, going against Tampa Bay. How dare you? How dare you throw?
How dare you? Oh my God, Michael Thomas! Good God, what more do you want? I'm going to take Jerry Rice and Michael Irvin and all the best wide receivers in the land. Come on, man.
I just want people to have one cornerstone they could build lineups around. And to me, going against a Tampa Bay team, he's going to be likely shadowed by Carlton Davis, who's been one of the worst PFF corners of the year, giving up 1.4 yards per route covered. So I want people to make sure they don't miss out on Michael Thomas. And Josh, that's what I care about here is I care about the barest minimals that people need to be profitable today.
I'm really glad that we were able to do a 2-hour show and we were able to give our takes here. I don't know if anybody would have been able to find Michael Thomas on this slate today.
Look, people may forget you. The thing you're forgetting, Josh, is this is a slate with a lot of casual players, a lot of big tournaments, and sometimes people forget that Michael Thomas was amazing last year and even had one good game against Tampa Bay this year. So I just want to give people the best plays. That's really what I care about at the end of the day. Speaking of, we got a super chat here. The super chat from Nice Try. He was in favor of Matt's love of Four Loko, but also he asked Jared Cook or Hooper. Matt, we talked about this before, but who would be your lean here for your fellow Four Loko friend and Nice Try?
So, fellow Four Loko friend, always have love for you. Thank you for the super chat. I think you look at your contest size. If you're playing low risk, you're playing cash, you're playing something that only has a couple thousand entries, you can play Hooper. He's going to be more owned, but he has the higher projection. If you're playing something, of the Millie Maker field size and you need to gain leverage and you haven't already gained it in some other way in your lineup, that would be where I like to play Jared Cook. But based on raw projection, I think Austin Hooper's the better play.
Yeah, I think I would agree there. Josh, would you also agree with the take that it is a more of a situation where do you want Hooper than Cook?
Well, so I don't know the ownership off the top of my head on DraftKings, but on FanDuel, it's like 2-1 Hooper to Cook. So I just prefer Cook by default. They're separated by $100. It's just way easier in a large field GPP to go to Cook. If you're playing cash games, the answer is probably Travis Kelce. But if you're just playing in a GPP and the ownership is what it is, I think that they are equals from a output perspective. And if that's the case, give me the guy at half the ownership.
All right, so we've talked about Michael Thomas, and I guess, you guys both really gave a lot of love to the pick in your own way, especially Josh. I was just assuming it's a fundamental one, but we need to talk about him a little bit more here. And again, the reason to really, I think, key in on Michael Thomas, no Taysom Hill, no Latavius Murray, just two guys who do have a little more touchdown equity and have ruined things throughout the year over some of the other Saints players, just their ability to have the production we want in fantasy. But Thomas, I think, an obvious play. And but there are other guys here who are going to pick up some ownership. I know people may also want to chase the Deontay Harris week. Awesemo gave some good reasons on the last show why that may not be the wisest move. Just didn't run a ton of routes. And also we have Traquan Smith back this week. But Matt, how do you feel about Michael Thomas and then also these other guys were Sanders, Deontay Harris, Traquan Smith, and then Jared Cook we just talked about? Are you getting good amounts of those guys, or is it really Michael Thomas or bust for the Saints pass catchers?
It's mostly Michael Thomas or bust. He was a guy I was getting to a lot even yesterday before I started making some swaps off of Kamara. A lot of my secondary correlations in my GPP lineups, it's not full Tampa Bay, New Orleans, but a lot of them will be like a Chris Godwin and a Michael Thomas, trying to access that high team total and so correlate the passing attack in some way in a lot of these lineups where I think people might be going full Chiefs onslaught. So love Michael Thomas. As far as the ancillary pass catchers with Traquan Smith, he muddies the water a lot. Now, with that said, you're going to get extremely low ownership on all of these guys. So Traquan Smith, he's a deep threat. If he ends up catching one of these bombs like Allen Lazard did yesterday, you're going to be dealing with a huge leverage score in your lineup, which could help you. But ultimately, it's going to be Michael Thomas or bust for me.
All right, Josh, how about you here? Is it Michael Thomas or bust as well for you, given your incredulous response to my courageous and heroic pick?
Yeah, courageous and heroic. No, it's not actually. Emmanuel Sanders is 5,700 on FanDuel, projected for 20% ownership right now. There's a couple guys in that range, but they're picking up significantly more ownership. Like Higgins at 5,300 is in the 30s. McCole Hardman just short of 30. Not that they shouldn't be. I mean, I like both of those guys as well. But for Sanders at 50 or 5,700 at 19.9 or somewhere in that neighborhood of ownership on FanDuel, that's another guy that I'm going to. So I actually have Michael Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders.
Yeah, Sanders, I do think is worth some exposure, especially given my heavy amount of Michael Thomas. He is the one guy who I think, stands to benefit. And really, if Deontay Harris throws people off the Emmanuel Sanders scent, I think that's a fine result as well. Are you getting, Josh, any Traquan Smith at all? And I guess, is that a play you would, so no, really for you, but I guess why are you not getting him? And is there any sort of, internal logic to that with, just him coming back here and maybe not getting the same amount of looks?
Yeah, so, based on everything that I've run, I've got Traquan Smith, Deontay Harris at like 4% odds of being in the optimal lineup. And I basically drew a line in the sand at Demarcus Robinson, who's at just shy of 20%. So we're not even in the same stratosphere. I can't get that low. I would need to play a lot more than 150 lineups.
Matt, did you get any Traquan or have any interest at all in him, at least theoretically, as a guy who is cheap and, theoretically against the bad Tampa pass defense, or at least, one that's their weakness by a wide margin here. Is there any use at all for him, even as like a 5% owned play?
Like Josh said, probably not. There's a lot of cheap, viable plays on the slate today with more upside, in my opinion. Could he go out there and catch 2 long scores? Certainly, but he maybe does that once a year tops. So probably not, but ultimately you could talk me into it. If you did that, I wouldn't fault you for it.
Okay, so there we go. So that's sort of the cheap value takes here on the Saints. And let's jump back over to a team we haven't hit on maybe as much, who does have one value play that maybe people can make a case for, actually two. Cleveland, their side, you're going to be expecting to be passing a lot today, given a big spread here, favoring Kansas City, still a 9.5 spread before the show started here. Has been upwards of 10 to 11, depending upon the books you're looking at. And you have Donovan Peoples-Jones is very cheap, but more logical targets and guys like Jarvis Landry, Rashard Higgins. We've talked enough about Austin Hooper, probably use a decent value play and also a decent tight end play if you want to try to get away from Travis Kelce. But Josh, where do you get now these Cleveland pass catchers here? And is there anybody who strikes you as being worth some exposure, given that we do have some semi-value plays, even if they're not, very, very easy minimum salary value plays?
Yeah, given my exposure to the Browns, I probably have too much for Rashard Higgins, and I'm going to try to walk it back. But he's kind of the only guy that I'm getting to. Like, I'm getting to Hooper, but not nearly as much as the field. Higgins is the guy that's soaking up a lot of ownership, 5,300 on FanDuel, $100 more expensive than McCole Hardman. I'm not getting to anything else from Cleveland from a pass catcher perspective. Jarvis Landry, I'm super low on. He's picking up a ton of ownership. I'm just sort of betting against the Browns, which... it's going to be like a really unfulfilling feeling if the Browns happen to win. Not because I wouldn't have any money. That's fine. I have losing slates in DFS all the time, but I don't want premium Slack member Fields to have anything good in life. So if the Browns happen to win, it's going to be like a double whammy of not great for me.
Yeah, okay, that's a fair point, and certainly Vegas backing the concept here that Cleveland is perhaps a bit out of their depth after they had their amazing win last week. Matt, how about you? Are you getting any appreciable amounts here of the Cleveland pass catchers, where you do have Jarvis Landry cheaper than some of his peers, definitely cheaper than all the Bucs receivers, and also Rashard Higgins, a value play who I think is a little more credible than a guy like Peoples-Jones?
For sure. Right now we have Landry coming in just shy of 40% ownership, which is a ton. He's kind of in a price island by himself, unless you want to play one of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And we discussed why they're a little bit difficult to get to just with their target distribution being very wide. Cleveland's is fairly narrow, so we know Jarvis Landry will receive targets. But like Josh said, they're kind of out of their league here in this game, 10-point underdogs in this spot. It means they'll certainly be throwing, but with Landry coming in near 40% ownership, I think you can take the salary savings and take the leverage with Rashard Higgins, who I also have the most of among Cleveland pass catchers, and just be fine with that. He's 4K. As far as Donovan Peoples, that was on DraftKings, by the way. As far as Donovan Peoples-Jones go, this Cleveland team uses a lot of 12 personnel, like we talked about before, with David Njoku, with Harrison Bryant. And when they're in those sets, it is Donovan Peoples-Jones who is not on the field. So while he's 3K, he might be a little bit enticing because of the negative game script. He's just not going to see as many routes, targets, snaps as Higgins or Jarvis Landry.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And there's a lot of logic, I think, maybe in going to these guys, or a little more logic rather than the projections seem to back out. But having a little bit taste of exposure to these guys, I did get, for full disclosure, I did get some people's Jones just in the hopes that he does something. But with Kadarius Hodge coming back, I think that's a situation which is basically a coin flip if those guys even see a meaningful enough amount of time to actually get production out of that. The running backs are one spot for Cleveland that we haven't talked about, and I think you can make a better case to go to some of those guys. There are certainly some ways that Cleveland holds Kansas City at bay early, and we do see them lean on Chubb. Clearly a team that's been focused on the run all year. Alex talked about in the deeper dive some of the reasons why he'd prefer Chubb over Hunt, especially after Kareem Hunt had a pretty big game last week. But Chubb, just a solid play week to week, has had some more pass game involvement. Matt, how are you handling Chubb at a reasonable price, but maybe one that people won't get to as much just because there's so many different ways to go and so few value spots to actually get to?
Yeah, and I think people will try to just get to Kamara, honestly, up in that price range. There is a decent price gap between them, but I mean, you're talking about Nick Chubb, who historically has not been the best pass catcher. That's not to say he can't do it. And of late, we've actually seen him targeted a fair amount. In the last 3 games, he has a game with 5 targets. He's a game with 4 targets. So he has displayed a little more of that recently, which gives me some hope for him in negative game script. But still, we're not talking about the best pass catcher on the slate. With that said, when we take a look at ownership, Nick Chubb's going to provide a ton of leverage at a running back position, given his price. So I think for that reason, you could get to Nick Chubb. On the 2-game slate, it's a little different. There aren't as many viable running backs, so he's going to be a little bit more owned there. But if you're playing the 4-gamer, he's another one of those pivots I think you can make if you're down.
All right, so there's a lot of the spots for Cleveland that we could talk about. And Josh, actually, I'm curious your thoughts as well on Chubb, because he sort of fits the criteria of Le'Veon Bell, maybe a different story on FanDuel, but, not a terrible price. Certainly a guy who has, the ability to get touchdowns, also the ability to break off big runs and really make it so you get into slate early for you. So what are you doing with Chubb? And also tell me your thoughts on Kareem Hunt as a lesser owned play, but one that people maybe will be on because of that box score from last week.
Yeah, so in theory, this is the scariest part of the slate for me. I think Nick Chubb's a fantastic play. I think he's a fantastic running back. He's $8,200, so $800 short of Alvin Kamara. But he's projected for 40-something% ownership, as is Kareem Hunt. And if this game goes the way that I expect it to go, or like my assumption, I mean, Kansas City is the biggest favorite on the slate by the significant margin. They were the biggest favorite on the weekend by a significant margin. If Kansas City gets out in front early, and obviously these guys are still going to be involved in the offense. It's not like they just suddenly disappear and they bring in new guys, but the goal for them would be to have additional carries to lean on. I don't really see that happening. I just think Kansas City is on a completely different level than Cleveland. I mean, we're talking about a team that got outscored for the season. They have been fortunate in the grand scheme of things, but from an actual football perspective, they have been outscored in the regular season. And like, that matters to me. This is essentially an 8-8 team masquerading as an 11-5 team. So with that said, I am massively under the field on Nick Chubb. I am massively under the field on Kareem Hunt. Success from the Browns is highly problematic for me if it comes on the ground. I don't like it, but if I'm going to pay $8,200 for Nick Chubb, I'm just immediately going to pay $800 more for Alvin Kamara. I don't think that they're on the same level. And if something happens in the New Orleans game and they happen to go behind, it's not like Kamara becomes a ghost. I mean, he's just going to be out there soaking up targets instead of carries.
So speaking of that, we got a question in the premium Slack, which of course is part of that Awesemo Plus membership. You can get yourself at awesemo.com/join, and different vibe than the YouTube chat, and but a lot of people there throughout the day talking about things, and same kind of concept. People hopefully trying to help each other out, and the community that we have on there does a great job with that stuff. And Gooch Tap, speaking of a great community, that's how you can tell the sign of a community is having people named Gooch Tap. How much Dwayne Washington do you get to? This is a question I've seen people ask today. Ty Montgomery, Dwayne Washington, people curious about their prospects, Matt, because of, just there has to be somebody theoretically who could take some touches from Kamara, but I don't see the need to get to Washington. I definitely don't see the need to get to Ty Montgomery, who is the most replacement back of all replacement backs this year. So are you getting any of these guys, or I guess, is there an argument to be made to even have a little bit of exposure to Dwayne Washington or Montgomery?
I would say probably not. In a competitive game like this, I think you basically just see Kamara handle all of the work. And we've had a few of these spots in the past where Latavius Murray's missed games. They've rotated in other backs, but be careful with the word rotate. It was mostly Alvin Kamara in those situations. So it's just a situation where I don't think you need to get cute.
Josh, I'm going to assume for you did not quite land on a Dwayne Washington, Ty Montgomery tier of backs for just in this chance that Alvin Kamara goes into the game and then decides that he doesn't want to play football anymore and he gives it up.
Is Kyrie Irving playing football now?
Yeah, it could be it.
That's the most terrifying part of the slate for me. Not just fading Chunt. Chunt. That's not how those names go. Chubb and Hunt. This is where I expect to get vultured. Ty Montgomery and or Dwayne Washington scare me the most because I just smell vulture TDs coming. It seems like that's the perfect way to do it after yesterday's slate being just like really criminally difficult to watch from a DFS perspective. I don't know who it's going to be out of those things. I have neither one of these guys. Absolute flat zero on both. I feel like a touchdown is incoming though. I guess I could, well, I can't really bet in North Carolina, but like I could bet in North Carolina. Taking one of these guys to score a touchdown feels like ultra safe as like a life hedge against my lineups.
Yeah, you can bet, of course, amongst your friends. We only support legalized betting here in the states that are allowed. And of course, you can find those over at OddsShopper. So make sure to check all your prop bets on there and you get all of your legal sports books out there so you don't end up with broken legs. I've been watching a lot of Sopranos lately, and it just seems problematic for a lot of people out there. Another question, the premium Slack, Mo Zibdawi asking, in cash, would you go Godwin and Robinson over Antonio Brown and Hardman? I'm going to ask you first, Matt, because we've talked a little bit about Hardman. You gave your reason why you have a little bit of love for him, but would you go to him in cash along with Antonio Brown over Chris Godwin and DeMarcus Robinson?
Is this a FanDuel question?
Let's see. It just says cash. So I don't really know.
Yeah, that 2v2 doesn't make sense because you get Mecole Hardman and Antonio Brown. That was one side, correct?
Yes, it was Hardman and Brown versus Godwin and Robinson.
Yeah, Godwin and Robinson are both more expensive. So unless you just have unlimited salary and salary is not a question, my preference would honestly be Godwin to Hardman. And based on the question you formed, I think you should be able to play that. But I'm a little confused based on the pricing and how that 2v2 was structured.
Oh, I think, he's doing the 2-game slate. I think for DK, it might be it because I think the prices are close enough. I would go Godwin and Robinson personally. I think Hardman's a fine GPP play for some of the reasons that Matt talked about earlier. Certainly can be a guy who has the big playability, but I feel like Robinson running some routes, probably getting a few more end zone targets just because there's no Sammy Watkins out there. I think that's how I would go. But Josh, assuming this is DK, would you go Godwin and Robinson over Brown and Hardman?
I'll be honest, I don't know the salaries, so that kind of matters. I can tell you this much. If it's FanDuel, Hardman and Brown are my 1 and my 2 of this group of 4. So it's 100% Hardman and Brown. If it's DK, I don't know the salaries off the top of my head. I'm going to assume that they're like relatively equal. And I would say it's probably still Hardman and Brown for me. But the receivers today just feel really, really difficult. I have a hard time separating all of them, basically, outside of Michael Thomas, who's, I think, the most obvious one on the slate.
That's the thing. A lot of people have been sleeping on him, and sometimes you got to remind the folks about Michael Thomas. So that's what we're here for. Getting some talk in the chat, which I feel like is worth hitting on about Le'Veon Bell, because we gave our Le'Veon Bell takes at the top of the show. People do tune in, and we want to make sure that we talk about it thoroughly. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is out. We're going to have a backfield with Bell and likely Darrell Williams, in the mix. Darwin Thompson probably not in the mix despite his big end of season results. But Matt, give me your take one more time here on Bell versus Darrell Williams. And for the people out there who are maybe scrambling to finish their lineups, which way would you want to go?
Yeah, I honestly think Le'Veon Bell probably sees more work. With that said, I don't have a lot of confidence in this. We don't have a huge sample size without Edwards-Helaire. And the games we do have, they weren't necessarily very competitive for Kansas City. I think they brought in Le'Veon Bell for reasons similar to this. When they lose guys like Edwards-Helaire, when Edwards-Helaire needs to be spelled, that's what Le'Veon Bell can do. He has a 3-down skill set. Good size, everything we know about him from the past. With that said, this will be a rotation to some degree, in my opinion. So if you think, all right, I didn't play Akers, I didn't play Diggs, I need to gain some leverage, Darrell Williams is going to be lower owned. He's still going to be on the field. If he's just the one that gets the touchdowns or catches the passes, that could be a leverage spot. So I actually have a good amount of Darrell Williams, with the caveat that it's all in lineups, the 4-game slate that have missed on some of the other studs.
Yeah, Darrell Williams is forever it's worth too. In the last game where people were really worried about him taking over Le'Veon Bell's role, the Week 16 game against Atlanta. There was a lot of third down work initially for Williams that got him there. So you could definitely see him catch some passes on third downs, even if Bell does have a decent day as the lead back. I think that makes some amount of sense there to go to Williams. Josh, how about you? What are your final looks here, exposure-wise, on Bell and Darrell Williams? Is it Darrell or Darrell? I feel like I'm going to go back and forth between both because I don't feel confident enough in either pronunciation.
I don't know. Does it matter if there's a second L?
I think so. I feel like 2 L's would make it Darrell, right? So it'd be like Darrell because like we're missing 1 L.
Darrell. I don't know. I'm just going to call him Williams. That should make things clearer for everyone. How hard can that be? I have a lot of both of them. And if our ownership projections are anything to be believed, I have many multiples above the field on both of them. I don't really care who hits. I guess in the grand scheme of things, I prefer it to be Le'Veon Bell because I have more. But either way, I have a lot of both.
All right, we got some questions here. Our boy Gooch again asking about defense. And we don't normally talk a lot about defense on here because it is often a case, as you'll hear in a lot of DFS shows, including ones on this channel, that whoever you can afford for the most part is going to be the defense du jour that you should probably be going with. But Josh, how are you feeling about defenses? I know this is not something you monitor too much besides the data points, but what are you getting the most defensively out of your exposures?
Yeah, so I have a lot of Chiefs and Bucs. Chiefs are a little bit cheaper than the Saints. Saints are picking up a bit of ownership. I'm not getting there mostly because of the ownership. I do have quite a bit of Cleveland Browns D, 3,200 on FanDuel. We're projecting them, somewhere in like the 6% range. So I have like 15 to 20% of the Browns D. I'm trying to scatter it as much as I can, and I'm not really comfortable with the amount of Browns D that I have, but I think it's worth that shot to just try to get a little bit different at the defensive spot. So Chiefs and Bucs are the guys getting it the most. My biggest fade is the Saints. If you get to Browns, don't be mad about it. Probably don't do it with Mahomes, but other than that.
Matt, how about you? Do you have a lean here with defense? I know you study that stuff a little bit more matchup wise and trying to figure that out. And, for the most part, DFS wise, it is sort of a crapshoot, but do you have a lean here based on what you know about, all these teams and one defense that stands up above the rest?
Right. And the price difference between DraftKings and FanDuel is important. You get the Saints at a cheaper price comparatively. They're below the Chiefs on DraftKings. So I do have more of them on the DraftKings specific platform. Have a lot of Bucks. I also have some Cleveland Browns, Josh. So we're going to be holding hands against Mahomes in some of our lineups. I'm not saying go out there and lock Cleveland. They just happen to be what fit in some lineups with some studs. So I am going to be playing a little bit of that. Mainly what I look for in defense, our team's going to be playing with positive game script. Do they get a chance to rush the passer? And to Cleveland's point, even in neutral game script, the Chiefs are very, very pass heavy. Patrick Mahomes doesn't make a lot of mistakes, but in the chance that he takes some sacks, maybe a sack fumble, the Browns are at least going to have opportunities to get points. Whether they get there or not, that's a different question.
So I guess my instinct was right. If Lisa were to believe Neo Brown in the YouTube chat, it's actually Darrell. I know this because it's my name too. And a lot of people chiming in that it is Darrell. So I feel good about that. We got one thing right here that we can share with the chat, and a shout out to the chat too. It's been a bit of a weirder chat than usual with some very angry people, but for the most part, it's like anything in life online. There's always going to be the angry people who are the loudest and the most uncomfortable, but a lot of you guys out there are sane and very normal. We appreciate you very much for being here. So just want to make sure we say that because sometimes things get misconstrued in the way that we do these shows. No good question in the Slack. Josh, any final thoughts as you're going through your exposures that are popping up? Anything that we haven't brought to people that you feel like you're observing in your final crunches?
Oh, man. I think I've pretty much touched on everything. Leonard Fournette's scaring me a little bit. Like, I don't want him at all. I don't like him. It feels really uncomfortable, but I think he's just kind of necessary if you're not on Chubb/Chunt, if you want to go that direction. I don't know. I think we've pretty much hashed it out. Look, I think you kind of have to win a lottery here. You have to win the lottery of getting the Bucs receivers right if they matter. Like if one of them happens to matter, I mean, I don't think that anybody's going to feel really comfortable picking which one it is. Like I've got Antonio Brown to be in the optimal lineup 33% of the time. I have Mike Evans at 33%. I have Chris Godwin at 30%. Like the idea of hashing that out with any sort of real thought process is impossible. So I'm going to hope that I'm right. And I'm hoping that it's Mike Evans out of the three, but you're just going to need a lot of good fortune, particularly on these two gamers. And if it's the 4-gamer we're talking about, like make sure you're paying attention to what you have in, because don't leave yourself boxed out right out of the gate.
Matt, anything for you popping up here as a last thoughts, either about things that you're noticing in your final lineup exposures, or just anything that we haven't hit on that you feel like is worth bringing to the people?
My favorite spot to gain some leverage and still access the highest team total on the board is the ancillary Chiefs receivers. And we talked at length about Hardman, Robinson. I think both are good plays. One other thing I want to mention before we head out of here on those receivers, in the sample we have without Sammy Watkins, it stretched 5 games. Byron Pringle played a significant amount in that span. We're talking 3 of those 5 games. He played more than 50% of the snaps. Byron Pringle, to me, is going to be similar to a Donovan Peoples-Jones. I expect the snaps and routes to be similar. And then you get Byron Pringle playing with Patrick Mahomes. Again, he's as risky as you can possibly get, but he's a name and he'll be on the field. And we're just talking about 2 games, so leaving no stone unturned.
Yeah, Pringle is also, for whatever it's worth, Matt, a very sharp guy. Alex Baker, Awesemo, very sharp guy who also mentioned Pringle. So I know I got a little bit with Awesemo's projections today, and I'm willing to ride with it just because, as Josh mentioned too, it is a lottery ticket. You're trying to get this configuration. We also do have 5 minutes left, so we're going to see if we have any other last-minute questions. I knew that, but I was hoping maybe we would get to the finish line by just you guys giving your final thoughts in a classic Jerry Springer moment, maybe some.
I mean, we could have just pretended like it did lock at 3 and got out of here.
True. I guess that's, what, I'm a man of honor. No matter what a few angry accounts will say on YouTube, I am a man of honor, if nothing else.
I'm just nervous now.
So, also, to be clear, I just want to say, because we have this extra 5 minutes. There's never been anything that sounded more like a slur that isn't a slur on this channel than the word chunt. I just want to.
Yes. Yes.
Don't say that to your girlfriend in the middle of a fight. That's the one thing I would say.
I mean, yeah, that might be your way out. Be like, look, I really like Chubb and Hunt. Okay.
That's the real money tip of the day is don't call your girlfriend chunt at any point soon here. Matt, actually, here's one question for you that I'm curious about. Is there anybody, you mentioned Byron Pringle, but anybody you ended up really above the field on that we haven't pointed that out specifically, but anybody you really went heavy on that might be shocking just based upon how we normally approach things here with trying to level out exposures and all that?
Yeah, on the 4-game slate, I have a lot of the cheap Chiefs receivers. So it sounds like Josh is making a lot of his lineups with the Chiefs running backs. Unfortunately for me, I used a lot of those spots yesterday with Devin Singletary being the main one. So my pivots are going to have to come from somewhere else. And a lot of that is just going down to Chiefs receivers that are cheap.
Okay, that's a fair one. Josh, anything for you here in your final exposures that I know you like to save all the good information for yourself because now that you're a big money winning guy on FanDuel, now you're just hoarding all the tips, but anything that you want to tout here for the people so they don't have enough time this way to steal all your good ideas?
I don't really, I think I've hit on everything. Le'Veon Bell and Daryl/Darrell, whoever you are, Williams, will be a pretty big key for me. That's the spot that I'm most over the field on. Or it comes out that Bell and Williams have significantly more ownership and I don't feel as wise. But for right now, that's the key piece for me. How the Chiefs backfield shakes out is important, but the fact that the Chiefs backfield succeeds in any way is the most important piece of the slate for me.
Yeah, and I think for me, just the one guy that I have more of than I probably should is Emmanuel Sanders for the reasons that we talked about earlier. Just I think the passing volume here is going to go towards somebody, and obviously Michael Thomas, Alvin Kamara, the obvious guys. But there's room for one more guy here to have some better results. And for me, I think that's going to be Emmanuel Sanders. You know what? I feel like we really covered this about as thoroughly. Here's the last thing we can hit on. Who is your fade of the day, Josh, relative to everything that we know here and all that we've talked about over the last hour and change?
It's got to be Kareem Hunt. I think I have a very minimal amount of him in comparison to his ownership on FanDuel. Look, he's in like he's around 40% owned on FanDuel. I have 13%. So I need him to fail desperately. That's my biggest fade for sure.
Matt, who's your biggest fade relative to the expected ownership we have at Awesemo?
Oh man, it's scary. It's Tyreek Hill. Got to fade the highest owned wide. So let me explain. It's not that I want to fade Tyreek Hill, but I told you what my leverage play was today and how I'm trying to gain some ground on the field. I did not come into the day underweight on Tyreek Hill, but I'm going to leave today underweight on Tyreek Hill based on previous decisions that were made.
Our boy Nice Try chiming in one more time. The super chats feeling good about himself, I guess, after some wins recently. You guys are hilarious, but who is Chunt? That's the
Spags is.
That is I'm the biggest Chunt that you'll know out there. No, it's the combined Megazord of Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, or Josh's brain really melting, I think. Really.
Probably
All right,
not.
that's enough. I think for me, my fade, I guess, relative to ownership. Trying to think who.
I hope you tell me it's Michael Thomas.
No, I definitely, that would be the saddest of all. I think I'm most under on Chris Godwin just because I believe a little bit more in Mike Evans. And we had in the most recent round of ownership that we pulled from Awesemo, a 24% ownership for Evans. And honestly, knowing what I know of casual players and the things that they sort of, lock in their heads is that, Mike Evans never has good games against the Saints because of Lattimore. To me, that's something I do like to lean in on when I'm aware of these sort of narratives that could come. I think going to Evans a little bit more was the move. But either way, we are almost about to be locked. So we appreciate all you guys tuning in, whether you are going off the rails in chat or not. We really do appreciate having all you guys here watching the show. Josh, what are the plugs? I feel like you have a live before lock for NBA coming up.
I do. I have live before lock at 6 p.m. tonight. And the last time that I did an NFL show with you, Spags, my live before lock was incredibly lucrative to me. I woke up with significantly more money in my account than I had before I went to bed. So I assume that's just going to be the way Sundays work moving forward. You guys should watch NBA live before lock tonight because you're going to get the best goods you could possibly find.
And Matt, people should be following you at Matt Gajewski or Matt_Gajewski, on social media. You have a YouTube channel where you put some content out, but what's the plug for you? Any other Awesemo shows coming up?
To my knowledge, no. I do the Wednesday show with Lafayette and Kyle, but most of the NFL shows are winding down at this point. We said a lot of farewells over the last couple of weeks. So I don't think you'll see me for at least a few days.
So cherish your Matt Gajewski while you get him. And again, follow him at Matt_Gajewski on Twitter. Follow at Chris Spags. Follow at Awesemo_com. We'll be back with you guys again very soon. So good luck and pray for Michael Thomas. He needs it today more than ever. Bye, guys.